Good afternoon, everyone. I want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, including our near neighbors, the Shannon First Nation and Sac First Nation. Our home, a place we live, learn, work, and share. Welcome to the special finance meeting of January 25th, 2024. Pleased to see everyone here today, safe and warm after the extreme winter blast in recent weeks. Please be sure to have your cell phones turned off during the meeting, including the vibration mode. Committee, we have before you the agenda for this afternoon's meeting. And I would ask, we also have some things that we insert Councillor Shupin, who we do have on Teams attending today because he is in Ontario. If we put his submission into the portion where we will be in the committee discussion under 3A, please.
Can you see us?
He doesn't want to be on camera.
You can't see us?
No, he doesn't want to be on camera.
And that we put Ms. Ballard's at the correspondence in under 4, it'll be 4C, please. Moved by Mayor Little and seconded by Councillor Epp. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And it's public participation time in the agenda. And so anyone that wishes to speak at the mic, please state your name and the street on which you live.
Sasha Kubicek, 565 Wooten Road. For new members of the team, just give a little bit of history about Seabluff Farm. My wife and I own and operate the farm. It's a 10-acre certified organic vegetable farm, and we're one of the few farms in the CRD and the island that farms year-round. We have up to 6 staff at peak season, and we feed a lot of people in the West Shore, all the way out to Souk and Shirley. Farming is our only source of income, and there's a lot of challenges to farm, and as we all know, our big rabbit problem adds on to something that already is a tough go at the farm. Just a refresher that in 2023, it was one of the peak problems with the rabbits, and our farm alone spent over $2,000 on fencing, but we were lucky in that there was new leadership and a new council with the district, and they had the courage to tackle the problem and hired a contractor that did an amazing job and made a dent into the population. but unfortunately it was short-lived, and rabbits are exceptional breeders. They can have 3 to 4 litters a year, from 3 to 8 in a litter. So on the low side, that's 9 rabbits, as much as over 30 in just 1 year. And they can start breeding at only 4 months old. So you can see where a dent was made in the population, but it takes not much time for it to get back. Rabbits are also territorial, so the rabbits that the contractor removed was just new ground for new babies that were able to spread back into those areas there. With a new season and a new budget in order, I'm really hoping that the district can continue the momentum it had last year, and maybe extend the length of the contractor's work, and have a good amount in the budget to tackle this problem. And one piece that I think could have helped with last time was an education component, is because we want the citizens and public to be aware that feral rabbits have a severe economic and ecological impact, and that we don't want to get back to the same place we were over 10 years ago with them being dropped off, and now we're dealing with that problem. So thanks for your time, and I really hope you can continue the great momentum from last year.
Thank you.
Eric White, 4290 Metchosin Road. So just so that we're all clear about what we're doing here, the BC Community Charter states that as a municipality, we're a corporation made up of its residents. So at this meeting, we're here to see about our money. I'm curious, did we acquire any assets last year? Okay, I can't remember any either. So that's something that should be looked at this year, is acquisition of assets, because assets are what are going to pay for more than just going to offset our tax increases. Last year, unfortunately, though, we lost a bunch of assets. We lost instinct training from over at the school. The schoolhouse is one of our biggest assets, and having a business in there like Instinct was an even bigger asset, because providing training to our community is pretty much one of the things we can do to become more resilient and be a better, stronger community. The schoolhouse in general, I noticed that there's no contingency fund in the budget for it. Again, I think the school is probably one of the biggest assets next to the buffer lands that we have. And we really need to focus on managing that with high priority if we're gonna reap the benefit of the revenue that it could provide. So to invest in the schoolhouse is super important, I think, and I hope that the council can consider that. One of the things we lost out on last year was 40 acres of parkland. I know there was going to be a trade-off for it, but 40 acres of land, land is a huge asset, and as an environmentally conscious community, having 40 acres in our pocket to protect as we decided, as we need, would have been nice. So those are the assets that I know of and that I think we should focus on. It would be nice to acquire some more next year. Some of the expenses that we're running into, I think we need to address. The legal budget seems really high. It seems like it's gotten slightly out of hand. It was budgeted at 30,000 and we got to 41. So it's something to consider. I'd also like to have the miscellaneous administration. I'm not quite sure what that is. Does anyone? I'm not sure. Could you fill me in on? But it went from $1,000 to spending over $7,500, right? $6,000 increase over the budget. The doggy doo collection, I'm not sure how we decided that was financially responsible. It's a great idea, but it's $27,000 that we just don't have, I don't think. And we also have the bridge issue coming up. I heard the bridge referred to as an asset on Flesh Road Bridge, and I just want people to consider that bridges aren't assets unless they're like heavily used traffic bridges that are providing a return on investment for our community. Many people don't know where Flesh Road Bridge is, and if we're to dump a whole bunch of money into it and constantly pay to maintain it, that's not an asset, that's a liability. And then finally, we have added, I don't know how to say this properly, but we've doubled our administration budget by doubling up what we had a very capable member of the council or the staff doing, and now we have 2 people doing it, and I'm very curious to know how that is going to be balanced, because there's 2 people essentially doing what one person was doing before. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Nicole Shukin, Levon Road resident. Thanks for the opportunity to comment. I just have 2 comments. One is that the Federation of Canadian Municipalities looks as though it has some really impressive funding opportunities through its Green Municipal Fund, and I think 1 or 2 council members may have looked into this. There are literally hundreds of thousands of dollars for GHG reducing retrofits, capital projects, pilot projects aimed at reducing fossil fuel use in the municipality, and so on. But I think that to apply or to qualify for the funding, the district has to pay a small joiner fee. I think it's in the area of $1,500. But it then would qualify the district for possible hundreds of thousands of dollars in grant money. So that may be helpful. And then I also want to note that Metchosin budgets a huge amount for roads, and I believe that the fiscal and environmental costs of ditching in particular is one that council might consider. How about putting a stop to ditching for a trial period of 1 year, during which time the district could explore green infrastructure alternatives to ditching, such as vegetated ditches or swales. Vegetated ditches have huge cost savings as well as ecological values for stormwater, pollination, linear habitats supporting biodiversity, and they also have social and recreational values. Compared with a scoured ditch, vegetated ditches are beautiful, and I think that Brent Donaldson maybe commented to me at its past meeting that they're also better supports for roadside trails. Because ditching effectively excavates and deepens and lowers ditches with each scrape, and so it's harder to build roadside trails that way. So I'm hoping that the fiscal and environmental savings will not be dismissed. Ditching material is toxic waste that, if properly disposed at a regulated landfill, costs taxpayers dearly, and it also costs the environment, since toxic tire tread, microplastics, oil and gas residue end up in landfill. Vegetated ditches or swales, by contrast, kill 2 birds with 1 stone, or rather save 2 birds. They save money, and they save those dual costs of first excavating and then disposing of the waste material. So I guess I'm just calling on the climate and biodiversity champions on council to put an end to ditching for a trial period and to explore green infrastructure alternatives. Current ditching practices, to my mind, really are just excavation, and we have enough excavation in the West Shore. Vegetated ditches, by contrast, are a kind of form of regenerative agriculture, which believes in no-till, cultivation. And so every time we scour or excavate a ditch, we're effectively tilling and removing all of those sort of linear habitats that could exist there. So no till, no fill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I forgot. Airplane 4290 Metchosin Road. One of our biggest assets that I forgot about was our fire department this year. They managed to have their expenses by doing extra work, which I think that's a fantastic thing for our community. And our fire chief and fire department need to be given a huge accolade and round of applause for their great work. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Avro. Come Windfall Road. In the discussion today with the budget, could you please give a little more detail on the fee structure and the plan for maintenance, managing, and booking for the school, gym, kitchen, grounds? I think that covers it. Because I don't know where we are on that, so I'm not sure what you base the fees on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Kiara Kahakawilla, Perry Crossroad. I'm here today speaking on behalf of the Metchosin Community Association as the president. So in your budget, there is a line item in regards to support for the community house. My guess is it's probably not enough based on what it is that we need to do. So the community house, which is a lovely asset that we have here in Metchosin, is accessible to a point, but unfortunately it's not as accessible as it should be. And there are upgrades that we need to do to the house to make sure that it's accessible, one, to our new employee, but also to the residents and the users of the house. Residents of Metchosin, not the residents of the house. That would be quite full. The operating agreement that we have with the district, Section 7 says that major maintenance, repairs, and improvements shall be the responsibility of the district, subject to funding available. So I'm here today to let you know that we are going to be asking for some help in this process. There will be grants available to the district to be able to recoup some of those costs. It's my understanding that you might have to wait to apply for those grants retroactively based on an accessibility plan, which I understand you will be partaking in shortly, or at least are starting that process. Tonight our last board meeting was postponed due to the weather, just like your budget meeting was. So I had hoped to actually have that package of what we were looking for ready to go for you guys today. We'll be discussing that tonight, and so a letter will be forthcoming from the association, but I wanted to give you a heads up that we will be asking for very specific things to help make the house more accessible, and we will be looking for your assistance in providing the funding for that. Understanding that you have a great task in front of you of trying to set your priorities for the year for this budget process, and we will obviously be willing to work with you on any of the requests that we have. Thank you.
Thank you.
To Ballard, Wood Road. Just to clarify, it's Mrs. Ballard. So you have my pink in front of you. I think there's some good suggestions in there. But the one I would like to talk about actually is the in-camera meetings. So we've had quite a few this last year, 38. Previous years, the most was 14. For 10 years I went back. So I did, if anybody's interested, I did also go through, I did just only note the solicitor client privilege, section I, but I do have the rest of them as well for all meetings. 27 was the most at information A. I'd also like to note that the legal budget for 2024 is $115,000. It's quite large. I understand you guys have some things you're looking at and whatnot, but I think there might be room to be able to drop that particular budget down. That's 4 line items, by the way, for $115,000. Last year was 121. So this year there's a $6,000 difference in that. Yeah, and I look forward to hearing what you think of the pink I sent in. Thank you.
Thank you.
think the weather changed. Jennifer Burgess, Duke Road, a little creaky today. I guess one of the reasons I'm standing up here is don't forget that it's our good Robbie Burns Day today. I happen to have been born in that country, so I should have some scotch tonight to get over the creaks. And the more I talk about it, the more you hear my accent, but I don't really have one.
The plaid.
I like the plaid. Thank you. I'm up here today because I am one of the senior board members. And I think whenever we get into budgets in Metchosin, we have to remember our seniors. Our seniors are 26% of this municipality. So I thought I'd just offer you a couple of numbers, because you're all really pretty clever people. You got elected, you got a big job to do. But these are some numbers for you to think about when you're hard at work with your new CAO also and your CFO. And these are statistics. And there's a little story that, something about statistics, damn statistics, whatever. But the district of Metchosin has 1,860 households. 1860. So our population, sadly, popped over 5,000. Of course, not every one of the 5,000 are taxpayers, because we kind of got little guys and middle-sized guys, and then we got seniors. But the other interesting number is the median after-tax individual income in Metchosin is $42,400. Now, as far as my thinking goes, that is the group that you have to think about when you work for taxes. There are lots, there's a big spread, of course, in our households. There's a large group of households that probably give you a larger chunk of the money. But there's also a large group of households who are not really able to give you a lot of extra money. What it does for seniors in many ways is drive them into deferred taxation. And deferred is all very well, but it's also taxed by the provincial government. So what happens is we end up taking away the legacy of some very good folks, because they have to do that, and after they pass, there's not much left for them to pass on. So maybe these sound a little gloomy because it is Robbie Burns Day, and he certainly wasn't a hot money maker, I can tell you that. So I just thought I would bring that to your mind. But the other thing I would like to hear a bit more about, or a bit more thought about, is how much we can pile into this wonderful Growing Communities grant that is over $2.5 million almost, right? Which could have a significant shift if we can get some of what we're budgeting or working on into that wonderful parcel of provincial funds. So that's me for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Gary Lamb, 860 Hackamore Drive. Excuse me. Question, I'm looking at the draft 22 financial statements, and I see cash and cash equivalents of 16.8 million. Given there's no disclosure as to any encumbrances on that, and that represents a 1.7 million increase over 2021. I'm questioning why we're seeing that big an increase in unencumbered cash. I just throw that question out. The other question is, in our budgeting process, it does not seem that we follow a zero-based budgeting process whereby everything is set to zero, and then as we prepare the budget, it's built up from zero. It appears that what we do is take the numbers that were set for the previous year and then just add to them without necessarily, in certain cases, there being a lot of what I'm privy to or the public is privy to, the detail or the background on it. So, and when you look at the increase, and just as was spoken to, it's going to be difficult for a number of people to take that kind of an increase. And when you look at the 5-year budget, it potentially is going to be in those ranges for the next 5 years as well. So I suggest the council take a good hard look at its budgeting process and look closely at how they, number one, earmark cash and how it's utilized, and number two, the budgeting process, contemplating zero-based budgeting versus just simply adding on to what the budget for the prior year was. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? It's almost 100% participation. That's awesome. Okay, so we'll move on to reports, section 3 of the agenda. And this is the staff report for the 2024-2028 draft budget, which is what we're discussing this afternoon, the operating budget. So I'd ask CFO Panowski to step forward and start us off, please. And before you do, Jay, can you hear us okay? Good thing.
Sorry, yes, I can.
You can, okay. Thank you.
very much.
Go ahead, thanks.
Thank you very much, committee. So before I start, the presentation is really a summary of what's in your package as well. There's the questions that were brought up by the public that I would like to answer. So the first one is, question was brought up about the increase of the admin other for last year. So the reason for the huge increase was that it was for a refund for a deposit that the resident had made for our shoreline study, which council had passed a resolution to refund. Because that money was taken the previous year, we obviously couldn't go back and refund it in the year that it was taken, which was in 2022. Therefore, the refund itself shows as an expense in admin other for 2023. So that was an amount of $5,000. And also, there was a question about council other. So the breakdown for the council other is about half of it was for food. So that is for food that's brought in for between in-camera and regular council meetings. But on the question about the FCM membership, Ms. Schubert is correct that there are a lot of grants available. Up until this point, council hasn't been in favor of joining or paying for the membership for FCM. So off the top of my head, I believe it's around $3,000. So if that's the direction that council wishes to take in the future, we can definitely include that as an expense for the FCM membership. Ditching. This is coming up to year 3 that the district of Metchosin hasn't ditched. I spoke to an engineer, so just really asking him about the merits or what his thoughts were about leaving the ditches natural versus ditch. So this is his very preliminary response to me, is that it's not to say that leaving it natural is not a good idea. However, it must be done with a proper assessment, primarily because the ditch and culvert has to be able to perform its main function, which is to let water flow through. So again, that's not to say that it's not a good idea or a good idea. However, it must be done with proper assessment of what actually can be done, which ditches can be left unditched and which ones needs to be ditched. Another advantage or benefit for ditching is that they will extend or at least maintain the life useful life of your roads, because if you don't ditch, it's the water will overflow and it'll just start taking away your shoulders of the road. So those are just the few points that the engineer mentioned to me, and I just thought I'll pass that along to the committee for your consideration if you would like to give the direction for us to do an assessment, or what your wishes are on that particular area. On the question of the school maintenance, the fees that were derived by just looking at comparatives of the area. So keeping in mind that Metchosin has never done this before. So the fee is just comparable for similar facilities in the area. Of course, the total revenue is just a guess. My guess is just as good as your guess. We will not know until we actually get to the end of the year and see where we land up for 2024 in terms of revenue. Expenses, they will increase accordingly and based on what's being actuals for 2023. So you will see that the janitorial for the school is taking quite a bit of increase simply based on the fact that there are 6 new bathrooms to be cleaned. There's also the kitchen, there's also, the gym is not new, but the bathroom is a huge part of that, of the janitorial maintenance. And for the overall maintenance of the school as well, it's amount that's been added to for the need for an assessment plan. So really having a plan assessment done on the property to be able to anticipate any huge expenses that may be coming up. For example, if you're going to be looking at roof replacement, perimeter tile replacement, those are the things that we should have assessment for, so that there are no surprises down the road and we are not in the position where we are reactive when something goes and we're just, okay, council, I need $10,000 or council, I need $20,000. With a proper assessment plan, to the best of our ability, we can anticipate some of those big ticket items that might be coming up. Okay, so those are the notes that I have from and the cash and others, those are primarily for our reserves, the reserve assets. So it's actually not liquid cash, or not much of it, not all of it. So a lot of it is encumbered because they are reserves and appropriated funds. Okay.
Councillor Donaldson.
Yes, Councillor.
Sorry, through you a question to Ms. Tarnowski. So, Ms. Tarnowski, I think you just sort of answered I haven't really heard that term before, encumbered or unencumbered funds. So I would think that like some of the capital funds are encumbered and that they're for a very specific purpose.
That's correct.
Is that okay? And we probably have certain reserves where we have a little bit more flexibility and discretion. Is that possibly true?
That's correct as well. So if you, as a reminder, in June, every June is when the reserve review policy states that the reserve balances is brought forward to council for discussion and direction if that's the direction that council wishes to go. So just a little quick reminder about the reallocation of reserves. If it's council has the discretion of reallocating operating funds among the different reserves. So for example, snow removal is very specific. Not just any operating reserves, council does have that discretion of reallocating them, but you cannot reallocate between capital and operating. So you couldn't say you're going to take it out of your equipment reserve to put into the snowstorm, for example, reserve. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So in Tina? Are we just redundant there again? Try that again.
Press hard on it.
Oh, press hard. Maybe I don't have the touch.
You go ahead, I'll just.
Okay. It's not that many slides. Okay, go ahead. Next slide, please.
Hang on. Might even be frozen.
Uh-oh. Oh dear, it's really tiny. No, it's good. Let's try. Oh dear. Sorry. It's a good thing you have a copy in front of you. So this is a summary of what's in your package, page number
9.
Let's just start it. Page number 9 and 10. So I've done this a little differently for this presentation, and hopefully it'll guide the committee to look at what has been done. So what I've done is totally on my own call. So the items that are highlighted in green, I'm considering those non-discretionary. You will see, for example, the first line under general administration wages. I mean, that obviously is non-discretionary. So that's what those green blocks mean. Again, totally my judgment on calling these items discretionary. So you will see that through your handout package that has those green lines, that just based on those items that have been highlighted, we are at just slightly over 10% tax increase. This is where I would recommend that the committee take a look at my classification and provide feedback as to what you consider discretionary or non-discretionary. So I'm hoping that this document will be a kickoff point for your discussion. So my apologies that it's so small that you can hardly see up there. Would you like me to go through the green items, or what is your wish, committee?
Committee? Any input? I do have one question on the second page of your spreadsheet or your chart here. Under planning, there's invasive species control, and in our budget, I believe there was 2 line items for that. Can you explain this one? I know what the other one is about, the 20,000. This one is the 10,000 under planning.
So that 10,000 is increase.
Okay.
Yeah. So because that's the rabbit management, we had 10,000 last year, and this year we're proposing doubling, so it's 20,000.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Committee, any input? Councillor?
Yeah, I was wondering, I had a question about the, under Public Works, about the Public Works Supervisor salary. So I understand that the building inspector is taking that over. Is that correct? Chris Watkins is taking that?
That's correct. So if I can just provide background on this revised responsibility for the staff, is our current building inspector does have hands-on experience on public works related jobs like building roads and cleaning sewers. That comes in very helpful, and other things. So the reallocation was done to provide 2 parts really, to provide public works with a much needed supervisory guidance, and it definitely takes a bit of a load off the public works lead for sure, in terms, especially in light of the recent snowstorm, scheduling the personnel and making sure that all the personnel are ready to go in our recent snow event. So because we are asking him to take on additional responsibilities, we also had to increase his wages accordingly.
Well, I guess I was wondering is that, because I don't disagree that we needed the position, but when our former building inspector only worked part-time, so when we needed that to fill that position, we had hoped to get someone part-time, but couldn't. We could only get someone full-time, and the person, Chris, that was hired was under the understanding that he would be doing other jobs as well as the building inspection part of it. So I just wondered how that worked with what the other jobs, I guess it's just the increase in the wages and what his other jobs,
Okay.
part of that.
So I can speak to that. Part of his salary allocation goes to bylaw enforcement. So he is, in cases where appropriate, he would be the first point of contact with something really simple. We're not talking about complicated bylaw complaints and things like that, but it's just sending a staff out to have a conversation with the complainant or this subject of complaint. Then a lot of the time, Chris is the building inspector is the staff that attends to those calls. And of course, he has his building inspector responsibilities, that's his primary responsibilities. And on top of that, the public works.
Okay, thank you.
Marilyn.
Thank you for this. I just had some questions regarding the policing. So we already haven't we already agreed to the 5th officer?
Yes, we have. So that is just to show that if it gets filled, then we'll pull from the reserve or tax accordingly. So that's why it's in and out. We are expected, or in our agreement, we have agreed to 5 members. However, that's not to say that it will be filled. And most of the time is we never pay for the full member strength just because of vacation and things like that. So, and the police RCMP works on fiscal year of June to May 31st. So we don't even know. We've only paid 2 invoices so far. So what the total is going to be, we don't know for another 7 or 8 months until the final invoice comes in.
Okay,
Yeah.
Councillor Gray.
Thank you. I'd be happy if we walk through this spreadsheet. It seems there's lots here that's worth talking about. So this represents increases. So these are the cost pressures, and we're not looking at our existing budget in terms of these numbers.
That's correct.
Great.
Yes.
So the first line is council increases, and there's $700 noted under extra services. What would that represent?
So this is for the second volunteer appreciation events.
So it's discretionary, I think, rather than non-discretionary.
It could be classified as that if the committee wishes.
Well, I think it probably would be good to pull it out because we want to measure the trade-off. At $700, it's hardly anything, but the trade-off with other costs. So I just mentioned that one maybe. The wage increases then, those are agreed and no ability to move that. The new CO also, that's been in place. The new phone system, is that something that we could not do?
So our current phone system is is at least 10 years old. It is no longer supported. So just to relate the difficulty last year is when the time changed, the phone doesn't have the ability to automatically change the time. So what that means is that the message that is based on the standard time, when the time changes by an hour, either forward or back, that message comes on at the wrong time. So what staff had to do is they actually had to phone or IT support, go through multiple layers to actually get the support to change the time on the phone. It is very, very old system. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, maybe what I'm hearing transition-wise is that we won't function very well unless we replace the phone
That's
system.
correct. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So if you defer it, it's just that it's just. So what we're paying is that staff time to go and do some simple tasks like making the time change on the phone system.
Great, thanks. I'm just going to comment. Jay, can you hear us? I see there's a message come up on the screen.
I can hear you very well.
Excellent. The next one is IT storage. What would that be? Is that you're saying it's non-discretionary, but what is that again? Is this the taking our paper records and putting them into a digital format, or is it something different?
Right. So that's part of it. You will see in the capital that there's a request to convert microfiche into PDF. But for us to do that successfully, we will need storage space. And we are currently pretty much maxed out storage space because we do have staff member that on several occasions are unable to send email because the storage capacity is maxed out.
Thank you. So that's, if we want to function, we need to have
That's
that
correct,
there.
yes.
Okay. Wage increases is the next one under fire, and that will be straightforward. Bylaws, wage adjustments, I understand that. Bylaw legal, that's a reallocation. Bylaw contract, that's $10,000, and I understand that's from CRD. We reviewed and I think approved a contract with CRD for higher pay for the contract.
Yes, that's correct. So something to keep in mind about the CRD contract is that it obviously is based on the previous year's actuals. The reason that there is I would say pretty significant increase to the 2024 is that it was based on the 2023 actual hours used that the officers had to attend to the various complaints. And there was also a slight increase in the hourly rate.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I was remembering.
Yeah.
The next one that I see where I might have a question would be, I think we went over it before, but under Public Works, the engineer, that's simply moving to a new contract as our current engineer retires.
That's correct.
So it doesn't seem to be discretionary. The roadside trails, that, could we stop, do we need to spend the $5,000 on roadside trails? Not opposed to it, just wondering where the need is.
That would be just the maintenance and on the trails. It's just regular maintenance.
So if we reduce that, we'd have some money for roadside trails, but not what we need. Is that basically from Public Works staff?
That's correct.
The road safety projects, what would that be?
So that is, I would call it a part item. It's an item that was put forward by Councillor Epp. It's just really there's no specific items that have been identified so far. So Councillor Epp, correct me if I'm wrong, but just really not wanting us to lose sight of the importance of having some kind of road safety plan and budget for 2024.
Okay. So do you know much about that one?
Well, it's one we didn't put in last year, and so we were unable to get some of the improvements. But but given that was one of my questions, is I still, I know I've asked this before, but I still don't really see why that couldn't come out of either the COVID restart money or the Growing Communities Fund. Why?
So if I could make a recommendation is instead of spending from the growing community funds, my recommendation would be to spend that on bigger asset, because we do have the gas tax reserve, which is sitting at approximately $500,000 right now. And the intention of that grant is for us to spend on any initiatives that will reduce dependency on vehicles and also contribute to GHG reduction. So definitely safety, I would say that that definitely is a eligible expenditure under that grant.
So we could take that one.
You could take that out,
which is
right. But it's important for us to identify exactly what we're planning to do, so that just to make sure that it is an eligible expenditure.
Well, through the chair, could I offer that be put in the notes for this meeting so we see what it looks like next meeting?
I would think that would be a good idea. Would you like to make a motion to that effect? Is that what we need to do?
Well, I don't know if we were doing motions last year, if we were just saying if staff note it and then see what it looks like. The reason I'm reluctant on motions is we could come back later and say, oh, that wasn't such a great idea, and have to reverse ourselves. But we could note that.
Does the committee agree that this would be a good thing to look into? Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, just for clarity, the $25,000 would come out of the gas tax.
That's correct.
Okay, yeah, no, it's being supported.
Right. Once we identified the project and initiatives.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. The community house support, that's the one that we heard from a resident in public participation with $3,000, which may or may not be adequate. So I guess that's a watch and wait. We'll see what comes.
That's correct.
I have a question about that, Mr. Janowski. Can you explain to me exactly what that 3,000 is for? I've heard varying different things. I thought it was to do with accessibility, and I've heard it could be a paving apron because of potholes. I know there's a lot of different balls moving around accessibility in that piece of our property, so
Right.
I wasn't sure about this particular one.
So this particular amount is slated for improvement for parking and accessibility. Accessibility in terms of making the gravel area a little more accessibility friendly, where the parking lot is behind the community house by the gate.
Okay, on that side.
Ms. Cullen, correct me.
So the in front of the EOC.
That's
stairs.
correct.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
So specifically in regards to the parking apron, it is actually, so it's in front of the house where the parking area is now. VHA, which is one of our major tenants of the house in their program, there's a bit of a exposed aggregate apron that comes out. They actually park on the grass side of it so that when they open their doors, the people in the vehicle can get out onto the concrete area. So what we were looking at doing was putting in, expanding sort of that apron area and then adding in 2 to 3 stalls. One would be an accessibility stall and the other would be a staff stall, which at this particular point in time needs to be an accessibility stall. So that would give us essentially 2 stalls plus an apron area for pickup and drop off. That would be better for accessibility. I'm sure you've probably seen people in walkers with canes. At our Parents and Tots program, you've got strollers. That area is not really all that accessible for the regular person, but if you've got somebody who is coming and going in a wheelchair or in a walker or with a cane, that's what we're looking at. It's been expedited now because we do have an employee who is in a wheelchair, but really this is stuff that we didn't think about 30 years ago, but it is something that we need to be looking at now.
Okay. Before you leave, I just have a few other things to ask about that. We had explored this some time ago amongst user groups, and I know there was a great big renovation done on the house, and it's come to a much better place. It's being used to its full potential, I believe, and I'm sure we can even grow on that. Certainly bringing it up to accessibility standards is timely. As the appointee to an accessibility group, I do have access to a grant right now of up to $25,000. And another group I'm working with here in Metchosin is interested as well, and it's to do with surfacing. I would like us to explore that actually with that grant. We don't have an assessment done of all of our accessibility needs in the community, and I know that that's something that you and your group are working on for the house. So I would suggest that we explore that further. The second part of this is keeping in mind, it was a number of years ago I did a landscaping design course, and one of the things is to not mix, I think the artists in the community will understand this too many different mediums, and so I'm wondering if a different surface that actually will match the landscaping, the hardscaping that's been done, and whether it's the, certainly that type of gravel needs to be removed, but exposed aggregate or mats that put in an aggregate that makes it solid for mobility challenged individuals to be able to move on, as opposed to tarmac. If it was on the other side, it would have matched the other tarmac. I'm just thinking aesthetically and functionally if we could explore that. But most important, I wanted to offer that there is a grant that we could
access.
Yes.
May I?
Yes.
So a couple of things. We had looked at different surface types in regards to that particular area. The pavement that is there is already exposed aggregate, so that's what we were looking at to keep it consistent. That is slightly more expensive than regular concrete for obvious reasons. We had looked at the possibility of using non-permeable or non-impervious surfaces. Chris, your building inspector and now part of Public Works, has been working on quotes on that, and that is quite a bit more expensive. We've been talking a number that is higher than $3,000 in regards to what we're doing here. And the grant that you speak of, I know that we had talked about it before, and I believe Barb Swatsky, my vice president to the association, has reached out to you. So if you're able to provide us with more of that information, we'd be happy to explore that. And again, as I was made aware or previously, that there are other grants that might be available once you have the accessibility plan in place.
Correct. Okay, thank you.
So may I just chime in quickly about the readiness of the accessibility plan? So what we're expecting is an RFP for the accessibility plan consultant to be issued hopefully in February, if not March, and with completion date for the plan early spring 2025. So we're looking at least a year out for the plan to be completed. And as previously mentioned, that will enable us to access significant grants for accessibility initiatives.
Thank you, appreciate that. So we might be able to move on a little quicker for this particular need at the House, which is important. Yes, Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder then if we should, again, in terms of moving things along, have staff note that the $3,000 will come from the grant that you have access to, because that's 25 grand and this is 3. Even if it doubled, there'd still be money in your grant. Okay, so that would be helpful, I think. And then casting my eye down further, I just wanted to get through the discretionary and non-discretionary questions so we can do some calculations. The planning, under the planning heading, we have two important cost increases. One is to increase our planners' hours, and the other is to increase our legal spending there. And from our last meeting and from the notes, that's in response to the housing requirements. And then the other day, gosh, I don't know where I was, but I heard about the $172,500 Mayor Little announced it at council. I'm remembering now, funds from the government to help us with that. So that money, I think, has been deposited. Is it available to us?
It definitely is available to us. It's just that staff haven't had time to sit down and come up with the plan that we will be doing to spend that fund on. So all that to say is some of the planners' time can be charged to the grant, but until we do a more fulsome assessment to get a better idea of cost, that's just in there so that we don't lose sight that one way or another we will need additional planning time.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question, sorry, on the grant itself?
Sure.
Sorry to interrupt. Do we have to spend it in 2024? Does it extend to 2025?
It extends to 2025.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. So maybe those two lines then, just as we're discovering more at our next meeting, we could get a feedback on those two. It'd be nice to knock them out of the budget if they can be picked up through that provincial money. Invasive species control, we heard this morning or this afternoon from a resident about that. Last year we spent $10,000 of one-time money, and this year we're effectively responding to that call by doubling the money. So that's what I'm seeing here. 10,000 spent last year, 10,000 new. So that'd be $20,000 there. And we may want to come back to that to talk more about it, but whether it's discretionary or non-discretionary, I guess, is a discussion to be had. So then I think I heard pretty clearly the school spending would, from my perspective, be non-discretionary. And then the final is the revenue. So thank you very much, Mr. Nesky. Yeah, get things clear. So it looks like we have the possibility of knocking off about $28,000 or close to it, 75% of a tax point. Thank you.
Councillor,
I just had one more question, and that was under the school and under the loss of revenue from the loss of in-state training. That's listed as 37 plus 37,000. So I just wondered, we have no idea if we're going to be losing that much, or if we're going to be able to get other renters in there to make that up. So I was just wondering why that, if there's a reason why that has to be in there when we really don't know.
Right. So it's just more to be conservative, because this is not the full amount of the loss of the rent revenue. This is partially offset by the few bookings that have already been in place for this year. So obviously it's significantly less than what Instant was paying. But this is not the full amount. This is assuming that we do have, like I said, we do have a few bookings that already have been set so far to date. But of course the intention is that to further pursue a long-term tenant in there.
Councillor Gray.
Yeah, on that point, I think it's really important for another job for a new CEO, but to really pursue the question of making sure the bathrooms are working, and the reason, understanding why the previous tenants aren't there anymore, and then getting new tenants in there. And that'll help us on the revenue side of this operating budget. So again, something that I don't know if we need direction from council. It seems straightforward, but Mr. Pyatt's brand new, and I think it's sort of one of these job one type jobs that needs to get after, particularly because I think if we leave it vacant, not that it's going to get moldy, but it will appear to be not so attractive a place. And so lining that up, we have in our budget, I think, I don't have it right in front of me, but something like in the range of $11,000 paid to a leasing agent. And I'm just thinking we should probably, we had previously talked about that money could come over for a booking person, but we'll be left with that left in our leasing agent amount, I expect.
Okay, any other comments, committee?
So maybe that's the issue. We don't have money in the school budget, which would probably be non-discretionary for somebody to book the hall, book the school, or some plan about how we're going to do that. Will be needed relatively soon, so we know whether or not we need to put money in here for that position.
So did you want to explore that now, or do you want to wait till we get to that page in the agenda? Because there are a couple line items pertaining to that.
Okay. Where will we pick that up on the agenda?
That would be under the school site page.
Oh, you mean you intend to go through all the pages?
Well, we can address the pages,
Okay.
not line by line, but.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Donaldson?
Yes, Councillor Schiffman.
I have a few questions if people are through.
Go ahead.
Okay. So some really general ones through you to Ms. Tarnowski. We last year at the budget process, during the budget process, we did talk about one-time costs, and I believe those are based on budget surpluses. So I feel like I should know the answer to this question, but are we going to be able to have that discussion this year?
Surplus? Yes, we will be. So once we're done operating, we'll move on to the capital, and surplus is left until the last item to be discussed, because we need to have a better, more solid idea of what the actuals for 2023 is going to be before we can discuss what we're going to do with the surplus funds from 2023. So that will be the last item after after capital, and it will be surplus.
Okay, thank you very much. And on that theme, maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but I have a question related to page 26 of the and this is the transportation budget. But if you look at, go down to the middle of that page, and you will see the cost for mowing, ditching, and shouldering. I'm sorry, I'm not there myself, but there's a significant gap between what was budgeted and what's been spent to date. And it still looks like in the budget we're planning on spending the rest of that money, or having that, accounted for. But I guess my question is that money actually spent?
So I can speak to the mowing. The mowing, and it's budgeted for twice a year. and last year it was only done once. That's why you see such a huge variance of underspending. So the plan is again for this year to have the mowing done twice.
Okay. No, and the reason I ask this is I do not want to change, I do not want to shortchange municipal infrastructure. That just gets you in trouble in time. But the one thing I guess I'm wondering about is with some of the big differentials between what was budgeted and what was actually done, are we maybe asking for too much to be done? And is there an opportunity to look at things and maybe re-budget? So it's maybe not 50,000, but it could be 30, understanding that what it is Public Works can actually do during the year. Maybe that's not a question we can answer right at this moment, but that's the thought that goes through my mind.
Okay, I can answer that, Councillor Shukin. So this version of the budget is a carryover and similar from the version that was going to be presented on January 8th, which was kiboshed by the snowstorm. So for the next version that's coming forward, I've had a good sit down with the Public Works crew and supervisor to actually go through line by line and then to make an assessment on if they can actually spend the budget for the 2024. So for the next version, you will see those budget that is based on the crew's assessment, whether or not they have the ability to actually spend the money.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for raising the reserves, and I think it's a really good idea to look at something like the amount we're allocating. Sorry. Just back to ditching for 1 second. As Nicole Shukin mentioned earlier, one of the things that I talked about last year, maybe briefly, is the potential of doing a pilot project in terms of where we can avoid ditching, where we might look and just see how, whether it's a swale type sort of setup that exists currently and how it works over a period of 2 or 3 years. So I'm not in favor of not doing any ditching, but I think it would be interesting to look at even pick 2 roads and possibly see how they work under various conditions. So, yeah, just an idea that, and if we think back to, the discussion we had last year in the strategic plan, one of the things we talked about is getting a road assessment done, which, to my mind, that would have included, how concepts of ditching, shouldering, etc., and where we can, how those practices actually can be put to best use. Maybe they are right now, but it would be interesting to have an extra set of eyes looking at that. So I throw that out as an idea. I just want to go back to, the 25,000 for road safety initiatives. I think it's a wonderful idea to see if we can use the reserves. And those reserves, I know that we pull out some for, road and, the general capital reserve, road capital and maintenance, I mean, that's topped up on a regular basis. But some of the other ones, COVID restart, we've got business development, minor public works infrastructure, planning and environment. To my mind, I don't think those, as I recall, have not been touched. And I think it would be interesting for us to look at how we can access some of our one-time costs and projects, and start accessing the reserve. And I think we have to do it with significant, discipline. But these have been sitting here for many years, and I think we've got some things that are significant for the community, and we can maybe look at accessing them now. And those are my comments for right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Shukin. I just want to elaborate a little bit on a couple of things that you had brought up. On Tuesday, I had attended the stormwater management workshop that the CRD put on, and this was in reference to farms and rural properties. I'm proud to say that it, probably almost a good third of the people that attended were from Metchosin, so we were well represented. Having said that, we had an opportunity to speak to a couple of different people there, not just the presenters, and we have invited a fellow from Peninsula Streamside. I can't remember the whole name of their group, but they have some experience with ditching, and so they will at some point in the near future be coming to give a presentation on the advantages of ditching, and if it's something that we can do, if we take it on as a pilot project. I do like the idea that we pause for another year on the ditching and not spend a lot of money into it for a number of reasons. One is difficult to dispose of the ditching. We also need, and in some cases, some of that stuff needs to be inspected, but there's a travel component to, as well, because as my understanding is, it needs to go up to Nanaimo now. The concern that was brought to us about from staff about the culverts and keeping those passages clear as well is something that would have to be taken into consideration. So look forward to seeing this presentation, learning more about it. A number of our residents have been advocating strongly for this, and I think it's something for us to keep our minds open to. And there's a lot of pros and cons as to the whys and wherefores of where our ditches are and how they're actually functioning. So I look forward to that. In regards to the other comment you made with the transportation services page with the contracted out services, which is ditching, culvert, shoulder, mowing of shoulders. I pulled up the previous year's budget, not 2023, but 2022, and it is significant increases that we had made since 2022. As an example, the ditching then was slightly over $2,000, and yet last year we spent approximately $21,000. And I know that we only did some of these things once last year. Another one was the shouldering. Big difference there from $4,000 to $20,000, and mowing from $12,000 to $19,000. So I understand and where your concerns are there, and I agree. I think that what we're proposing is quite high, and if we take the year to date as a guide and round it up slightly, then I think we could certainly, and keeping in mind where the tax rate is right now, which is quite steep, and who's paying into those taxes is a serious consideration as we sit here today talking about all of these numbers. So I appreciate you bringing that forward, and I support us zeroing in on some of these figures. Councillor Gray.
Thanks. Yep.
Yeah, just a couple of things in response to Councillor Shukin. The one thing I'd be wary of is the idea of using reserves for operating costs. That could lead to bad place. So I'm imagining that road safety project is a one-time cost paid out of the gas tax reserve. Another year we'll look at it again and figure out what's to be done, but not take an operating cost and paying for it out of reserves. I think we've been instructed clearly how that can lead to trouble. It seems to me too that we need to be aware that if we move hard on our budget, on the existing budget, and cut a lot of different things from there, we end up losing the ability to do the one-time projects. That's where the one-time money comes from. It's from extra money that you've allocated. So when you're thinking ahead that you do have some one-time projects you want to get done, that means you want to be somewhat gentle in your approach to the operating budget. And then finally, on the road assessment idea, I think we had $50,000 as a one-time project, and we didn't get that done. But I'd be most reluctant during the budget process, where we're just asking questions to one another, to do much. In other words, it seems to me as during the year, we've got a big chunk of the year where we're not looking at the budget, when that's the time when I would hope we'd be reviewing these projects and, deciding what we're going to do. So that when we come to the budget, we start off as we did on our first day, and the staff brings to us the recommended reductions and the recommended spending based on the review, say, of the ditching program. But to do it live in the sense of, I see a number here, we should cut it because of concerns, I'm more the idea that we should plan our budget and pre-plan and then arrive here at the table with some of those questions answered. So I see, we did this last year and we said, well, let's do the road maintenance project. And then that would have brought us, as you're pointing out, Councillor Shukin, the information on ditching, on shouldering, on the swales that we talked about last year. We didn't get that done. We've done a heck of a lot of other stuff. We haven't been slow in not doing things. I'm not criticizing that way. I'm just saying that let's get that work done. I believe that $50,000 will roll over and be available next year for a road maintenance study. We should do that. And then next year, look at the question of the swales and other things that we might like to do depending on the advice we receive.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. So in regards to reserves, I think what Councillor Shukin is saying is a number of our reserves actually are beyond their actual, they're beyond the minimum, they're even beyond the maximum. So there is money there, and I'm not suggesting that it should be put into operating, but put into the appropriate places that we need to start moving some of those funds. In regards to one-times, I think what's more realistic is for us to look at our operating. Operating is what we need to do day in, day out. One-times, yes, they are extras, but we need to keep perspective of what those one-times are. So when I'm looking at the year-to-date and was advised early on in this that is a guide, and we've got some history there of a couple of years of budgets that we even were provided last year, that gives us a track record. I don't wish for us to move too far away from what has worked and get too far into the goal is to lower the tax rate. If we're going to keep going higher, then it's difficult. Ms. Tarnowski?
So I just realized that on your handout, I'm missing the bottom cell, which is on the screen, which it's pretty much impossible for you to see. And that green cells at the bottom is the total for all the green lines above it, and that adds up to 10.08%. So based on that calculation and my categorization, if you consider that all the greens are non-discretionary, you're looking at 10.08% based on these items. Okay. And another point to add as well is about ditching. The actuals that you see for 2023 is just hand manual ditching. There was no ditching at all using machinery. So just keep that in mind as we go forward.
Councillor I like the idea of Councillor Shukin and Nicole Shukin about doing some pilot projects on the ditching. We've done ditching for years, whether needed or not, and I think the way it has been done in the past is in the past, and I think we need to look at new innovative solutions. So a pilot project, I think, is a terrific idea, and the idea of taking the ditching material and then having to dispose it at another place like Nanaimo where they can handle a contaminated product it doesn't really sit that well with me. But certainly if there's used in other countries. We saw some email correspondence this week regarding that, and I would say let's give it a try in a pilot project. But I'm not in favor of doing a lot of ditching this year. That's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money, as was in reference to what Councillor Gray is suggesting about swaying too far away from what staff has presented for us for a budget. In actual fact, we saved $1 million last year in not paving a section of roadway, and I believe we came in at about $150,000 to $180,000 in revisiting a scheduled hard and fast paving program. So it is time to make some very calculated changes in our budget and the actions that we have taken from the past and what is working. And thus far, that's my comment a few minutes ago about there is a track record here, not to sway so far away, but to be mindful of where we're going with this. Councillor Shukin, did you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you very much, and sorry for interrupting here and there. One, I do agree with Councillor Gray in terms of what you would use the reserves for, and it's, yeah, I think that's probably a best practice. Don't dedicate it to an operational issue, like it's more of a one-time thing, so totally on that page. I have a question though, back to the green rows here, and that is the doggy doo collection. To me, this is one we really have to look at really closely. I'm really troubled that this is at the level of $27,000. I feel like there is a bit of a process breakdown here, and I may share some of the blame for that occurring. But $27,000 for what seems like it's going to be 2 receptacles, and an ongoing expectation of having this be a service that's provided. That's a tough one for me, and it is all what's a 0.75% increase. But can I ask a question of Ms. Tarnowski? So I think it said here it's $12,000 for signage, and then the rest is for the drop-off costs.
If we were to install all the signage, yes.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So just as a reminder that line item is not green. So it's not including the 10%. Of course, if the committee wishes to include that, we can do that. But as it stands right now, the 10.08% doesn't include that particular line item.
My reactive response, my reactive sort of sense of this is, we can't afford this, and I don't think this is a service we should be providing. I know there's a lot of correspondence around this indicating that this is what was planned, but again, in terms of process breakdown, this did not come to any of the committees for discussion, especially an item that is this significant in terms of budget. My understanding of the signage was that we were going to do signage that encourages people to take their dog poo with them. And as I think I mentioned earlier, maybe I didn't, but in the Dogs in Metchosin working group, there are some great examples of creative signs. That was the sense of direction I thought we were going to take. So, with the change in direction and with the actual public works burden, I feel like there was a process breakdown, and I don't want to. I feel I'm struggling to support this. In fact, I don't support it. I think we should look at removing this from the budget.
Thank you, Councillor Shukin. I would have to agree with you on that. It is my understanding that the 2 receptacles that have been put in place, they were about $1,000 each, complete with signage and the canisters, and that this $27,000 we're talking about is the labor to manage just those 2 in the winter months. And I believe they're doing that just a couple times a week. Is that correct, a couple times?
Right now, a couple of times a week.
A couple times. So we're in the winter months, so come time when the bees and the flies and everything else comes out, more and more people start using that sort of stuff. Those collection visits will be more frequent. And the challenge we're having with this is it's not just our public works picking it up, but we have to store it and then we have to dispose of it. And to dispose of it, you have to take it to Heartland. None of the refuse companies will collect it from us if we have to store it in a place. There are many negatives to this. Having said that, I don't think it's a bad investment to have the receptacles. We can certainly repurpose those for when we have events here in the core. I know that the business community has asked us to put up this sort of thing when we have large contingencies of people coming in, when we have a car show or a conference or Metchosin Day, those sorts of gatherings. So we've tried this. I think if they've been in place for at least a month, if not longer now. I had taken a walkabout earlier today over to the school and discovered that there's an overflow garbage trash unit there, and it's doggy bags that are overflowing, and who knows what else it's mixed up with. So we keep seeing photos of these things, and we're seeing, you know, them physically in front of us. So this is a very, very cumbersome task to be paying for. So as a person that sat on that committee, I was a strong advocate of Leave No Trace. And so I would like to put more of the education program into, or efforts into that. I do applaud that committee with the options that they did present to past council and this current council as it came forward, as well as the education campaign that Ms. Whitehouse has been working on with her group, and you'll see some of that information in the back of this agenda. It's very thorough, and I applaud her for the time and energy she's put into it with different media outlets, being the Black Press and the Times Colonist and various other places, including our local, Metchosin News. I think we can do the same education program with Leave No Trace in visiting their website. I did learn that as we go further out the West Coast, a lot of our parks and trails are Leave No Trace, and it seems to me that people are not having a difficult time with it. So when they start to learn and practice that, I know a lot of responsible dog owners that do come to Metchosin do take their dogs' feces with them. So lots to learn, and certainly I support us not spending this type of money from the taxpayers, and that we start looking at an alternative that is healthier for us, both fiscally and environmentally. Councillor
Yeah, to say I agree about the receptacles, but I didn't want to make a comment about public works and the ditching, and that I think the bioswale idea was brought up a few years ago already, and that the public works crew has a pretty good idea about which ditches could be used in that way, and which would probably need a little more serious work to keep them clear, because we do have to look at the environment in Metchosin, which is masses and masses and masses of fir needles that block up ditches and culverts pretty quickly in the winter. But as far as the other part of the budget, looking at year-to-date stats to form this budget in Public Works, I just wanted to remind Council that Public Works took a huge hit last year in cutting the budget for a lot of the things, such as roadside mowing, and which was cut in half. And the thing is that things like that, it's a fire hazard. It's unsightly. There's a lot of reasons for what Public Works does, and I think to base it on last year's numbers, which were in some cases pretty drastically reduced from the norm, is kind of a mistake.
Councillor Gray.
Sure. I guess I want to respond to what Councillor Ups just said, and this is kind of going to my concern about going into the operating budget when staff haven't brought us recommendations for cuts. For me, that's done off the budget cycle, and the finance chair can meet with the various departments and sort out, is there money that we can get. We run into a problem, and I will maybe mention it later, but we cut $15,000 for volunteer support from Public Works last year. The ability to bring back that $15,000 now, oh gosh, how can we do it? In my view, it was a mistake. We now get to this year and it's kind of, golly, we can't get the money back. Once you cut it from the base budget, it's very difficult to return it if it turns out you made a mistake. And we weren't asked by the staff, but they didn't say it's our opinion we should do that kind of thing. So I prefer that we stick at the moment to the cost pressures, the 15% increase, which is sitting on the page in front of us with these green lines through it. And I'd like us to go through each of the now what I would call discretionary money and figure out, do we want to spend any of this money? And then if you want to turn back to the other pages, sure. But I think we should go with the cost pressures first. So I mean, I did walk through the green ones because those were in the view of the CAO, non-discretionary. And we kind of walked through and we found out that most of them were non-discretionary. We were able to push out a few because of other sources of funding. But maybe we could look at the discretionary dollars now. And Councillor Shukin started off with doggy do. And I guess from my perspective, I think that I would be okay this year if we put it in a low priority. However, I think that between now and when we come to the budget next year, we should have a discussion, either at Public Works or at Planning or Environment, if you like, where we say, what are we going to do about welcoming the guests from the huge development in Royal Bay that's happening, the big developments in Langford that are happening. I think we will need to be picking up garbage at a certain point. It's just, is it this year or next year or the year after? So I would be okay now, but I think eventually we're going to have to talk about how are we going to help out. Councillor Shukin shared a photograph with those of us on council on January 2nd, picture of the huge pile of bags and things. So if those are being left on the beach, that's a terrible thing to do. Maybe people are taking them home, I'm not sure. But I think it is a problem that we should talk about out of the budget cycle. But if that slides down this year, I might well be arguing that they'd be higher up next year.
Ms. Tarnowski, did you want to continue with with this sheet and go on to the white
Sure.
line, or is there more in the presentation?
No, that's it. So we can definitely go over the whites. It would be definitely help out a lot if the committee is able to knock off any of the items that you consider discretionary or non-discretionary. So far, non-discretionary, we've knocked off a couple of items, but let's go through the white then, the non-discretionary items. So the first one is...
Sorry, this is on page 37, kind of? Like after your presentation?
So
it's page 9, Mr. Councillor Shukin.
Thank you.
So the first item is FOI contractor. When I was going through classifying these items, I was in a little conundrum because do you consider it discretionary or non-discretionary? As far as from staff's perspective, there's very little ability for staff to say, no, we're processing that FOI. So the FOI comes in, we have to process it. And given our limited staffing resources, most of the work is contracted out. However, that still involves staff time. So it's not 100% turnover to the contractor. There's still staff time, considerably staff time that's involved in processing those FOI requests. I just mentioned that to remind the committee that, is it discretionary? It's not discretionary. I have no opinion because it's a very tough area to manage. We were hoping that with 2023 that we would see a reduction in that expenditure. However, that hasn't been the case. And right now there's a big request that has come in, which Ms. Hansen is working on, and I'm going to estimate it's probably going to be close to $10,000. So.
Mayor Little.
And so what you're saying is, in your opinion, the $15,000 for the FLY contractor could be discretionary? We may not need it?
No, I would say, we need it. Just based on our requests that came in so far to date. We're not even past first month. We are at 10,000 estimate of just because of the volume of this particular subject. Yeah, it's
And that's 10,000 of the contractor's time, or 10,000
contractors
for the contractor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Councillor Gray.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because we kind of advertise an open and transparent council, and yet we are having to do more FOI requests all the time. And I'm wondering if there's some way that we could, we don't have to necessarily, it's my view, we don't have to release documents to tell people what's going on. And that if we would do better in terms of explaining where we're at and various decisions that we're making, then presumably some of these FOI requests, I mean, there'll be people who are curious all the time about whatever happened and, want to know something, and the law's with them. And I guess I'm with the law. If they want to find out something, they're welcome to it. We don't have no ability to restrict that. But I think it's incumbent upon us to be actually open and transparent in a different way. And maybe that will reduce some of these concerns. So it's a hard one. I think it's required of us, so that means that we don't really have an option. But we've eaten 10,000 now, or will have done by the end of the month or whatever. So maybe there should be 20,000, 25,000 until we can get ourselves in gear to be more open and transparent about what we're up to.
And as we sit here, only a year into our 4-year term, some of this is, a lot of it is historical. In the last year, I believe we are achieving more transparency. So I would applaud this council for working together on that. Having said that, it sounds like this 15,000 is necessary. I don't know. Okay, and so with that, if we went on to the next line item, often accompanying FOI is, there are some legal fees that are tied in with some of this. Is that safe to assume?
That's correct, yeah. So again, this one is a little bit of reallocation. We've moved it from bylaw, we moved bylaw legal, which we were quite considerably under budget for last year. So it's just a bit of reallocation there. In the total for the legal, I don't believe there's an increase overall, but it's just reallocation. So you'll see under bylaw legal, it's a reduction of $40,000.
Thank you. Councillor Shukin, did you have a comment that I might have overlooked?
No, I didn't, but thanks for that explanation. Yeah.
Thanks. Councillor Gray.
Yes, and the legal fees question, I mean, that's where we're getting opinions. It seems to me that's not just FOI, that's when we're seeking opinions of lawyers. And one of the residents spoke about how many in-camera meetings we have about legal fees. I think we're going to get better at that. I think that, to your point a moment ago about FOI, we're learning. And so last year we had a budget of $30,000. We spent $41,000. And the idea is, well, we better be careful here and increase it. I mean, that's, I think, where this has come from. Reallocate it, there's no tax effect. Or we say, actually, we don't need to increase that. We're actually going to use legal, we're going to seek less legal advice. We're going to work in a different way. I think it's possible, and I think this number could be decreased. I mean, I think we talked about already about using less legal
right.
in other meetings, so this would be a play of words.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Tarnowski. This also may tie in with the housing expectations from the government when we need to revisit our OCP before 2025?
No, it's planning legal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, sorry, one basic question though. I think, are you saying, Ms. Tarnowski, like our legal, overall legal budget is actually stable? It's the same as last year?
Yes.
Given that you're moving?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Sorry. I'm in favor of maintaining it this year. If we can find a way of, yeah, maybe as someone's saying, we get better and we don't need to access lawyers as much. But I still feel like there's the risk that we're going to run into some challenges, and we should have, the ability to access legal counsel. One thing I will point out, we've been talking about housing, but there's also the short-term vacation rentals that is coming up in terms of options that local governments have to enforce where people are, for example, using short-term vacation rentals as investment properties. It's not connected to their principal residence. And if we're looking at trying to open housing options in the district, that's something I think we should work at enforcing. So we may find that there's, for example, legal costs associated with that potentially. So I'm in favor of maintaining legal budget where it is. myself. So.
Councillor Gray?
Yeah, so just remembering last year, I was the advocate for all that money in bylaw enforcement. And of course, we didn't end up using nearly the amount of money. So 20,000 shifting over here. Fair enough, it's not increasing the budget, but we didn't need it as we thought we might last year. And I'm just, we're going to have to start cutting somewhere of the pressures or the asks, and this would be a place where we could do that. We can go by this now, but I think we're going to end up, as we move down the list here, we're going to be hitting into the teens of increases if we don't at least shave some of these. These are not, like we went to the actual budget, it would be roughly $40,000, not the $50,000 that we're planning. That's why my proposal of knocking 10 grand off. But
Any other comments, committee, on that? Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Other, it may have already been discussed, but other is what here?
It's just everything else in the department that is the small amount that is not itemized. So if you look at this, the segment department for general government is everything else that's not those items that have been highlighted above. So they're the items like, you know, admin other and that kind of stuff. So.
Councillor Gray?
and I think you mentioned it included, was it $2,000 for meals for in-camera meetings?
So that has been, that was the actual spend for 2020.
That's the actual.
Right.
So a lot of pizzas and sandwiches.
Well, we may be meeting less in camera because we did have a lot of focus on bylaw enforcement. I think we've learned now our role is different maybe than where we were thinking. And as I say, we've had a number of legal opinions, so we don't need to repeat those. I mean, we now have the education from those things. And personnel issues, well, we've hired a new CEO now, so that the effort, that would have all been in camera, of course. So that number should drop a little bit.
Okay, let's go on to the next section, the fire department budget. And the first line item here is the new position for $65,000. The previous budget, there was a request in the one-times for an administration assistant, and it was about $8,000. And we asked the mayor and I sat down with the chief last year and asked if we could put that on hold. And so we did. We took it out of the one-times. Now this position that's being proposed is a full-time union job with benefits, pension, and it's a forever position. I would like our new CAO and the staff maybe to see if we can actually provide some assistance to the fire chief to do the filing and light duty administration that she was looking for previously. This is a significant uplift in our taxes. It's not one that I'm taking lightly, and I'm certainly not comfortable with it. I think that there's another way to support the chief in some of the work that she's doing in her office. She does spend a lot of time writing grants for us. Maybe one of the things we can get is her to show some people how to write grants, and that she focused specifically on the fire department grants. That's just that's one spot. We're still only at 5,000. We've been a little bit lower in recent years, but not a lot has changed for this uplift and many others that we're going to see shortly here tonight. So this is not one I would support. I would like us to explore another option in how we can support our chief in doing some of her administrative duties.
Councillor Donaldson?
Yes, Councillor Shugan? So
I think that this is part of a bigger question now before us. And I believe as we move along, both as a council and as a district, we are going to discover that we are under-resourced. But to me at this moment, I think it's more about resource allocation and a resource plan. with one of the big issues that is coming before us is how do we manage the school now that we're looking to actively book, book groups, manage that, possibly try and get some revenue from the gym, and the two are not necessarily connected. What the new position to support the fire chief, but there is this other looming question about how we are going to resource the school, and I think there's a deeper issue that we should try and dig into in the coming weeks here and see if we need a position and actually what that position may do. And that's a question I think we have to obviously turn to our new CAO to get us, deeper insights into. So it's my sense of things right now.
Thank you. The school and the fire department are two different departments, and the fire department it's a large operation, a lot of responsibility, and I would really like to see our fire chief focus on the fire department and be supported in that regard. So going back to what I had said, this new position for the fire department, I think there are other ways we can explore supporting the chief in her focusing on the department itself. She also is responsible for the EOC, which involves ESS and ECC and a variety of other acronyms. The public safety building, which is also another thing that she is looking at. I don't wish to spread her thin, and certainly the school is a separate department. I have no idea how much it's going to require in managing or booking. Right now, I think it's key that we get a solid tenant in there in the commercial, and maybe we get two. I don't really know. We haven't explored that. We only have a report from Mr. Chris Core as to the potential of what can happen at the school. There's still some work to be done. We've got brand new toilets in there. We've got a budget for janitorial and cleaning those toilets. We do know that there's some infrastructure underneath the building that needs to be taken care of so that things flow smoothly and in the direction that they need to go. We have possible roof situation to rectify, probably the last part of that. We also have a gym that we've allocated as a gathering, not a gathering space, lodging, thank you. And that, we've already poured over $1 million into upgrading the school, but one thing that has been a big oversight is that building is not seismic. So we have a big event, it may not be much use to us as group lodging. So these are some things we have to look at really close. And then, like I say, there's a proposal of possibly replacing the fire hall, whether it's part of it or all of it. The other critical point here is we have an apparatus bay that's only 25 years old. Right now, if we had an earthquake, those trucks are not moving. The reason being is because the doors will not come down. So we need to protect our assets. And there's millions of dollars of assets in that part of the building. That is something that needs to be addressed first and foremost as well. So there's lots of balls in the air, and certainly the fire chief has a department she needs to focus on, and that is the fire department. So the public safety factor there. Yeah, so that's what I have on that at the moment. Councillor L.
Well, I do support the position. It's my understanding that would not just be a clerical position, but it also would be a firefighter that would be hired for that, which gives the department another on-call person during the day. There's a lot of new regulations that have come down regarding the service levels that we need to provide and the work that needs to, records, and just, I don't know all of them, but I know it's just been a big change as far as regulations. So I think that is a needed position. I think that the fire chief does an amazing job, basically working 24/7, and yeah, she does a lot of things, but it's been a huge benefit to the community what I was wondering was, given that we managed to, the fighters managed to get $400,000 into the budget for fighting wildfires last summer. And I wondered if any of these costs that are in this fire section can come out of that $400,000, or just what that money could be used for to offset some other costs.
So thank you, Councillor. I think I'm louder now, I don't do that. So that's an area that needs to be discussed. From my short survey of the municipalities in the area, no municipality has a policy to speak to deployment and what to do with the funds that is generated from the deployment. So my recommendation is definitely that's an area that we need to explore and make a determination as to whether or not that's a program that council wishes to support, continue supporting, and if that's the case, then what is the plan with the revenue that's being generated.
So the potential is we could potentially use it for this, the numbers in here, and that's would fund it for quite some time.
Potentially, yes.
I think it's interesting, Councillor Applewhite, you were saying about the day staff for the fire department. It was astonishingly clear when we had the school visioning meeting here, when we had 8 uniformed people in the daytime show up to that meeting, and I was surprised. I like you, thought they weren't around during the day as much. So granted, it is a volunteer fire department, and that wouldn't be every day, but that really visually stood out for me as to what is available to us. And I have seen one of our public works personnel actually attend calls during the day. So there's lots of different things that we can look at here, and I think our new CAO's got his work cut out for him when it comes to reviewing our staffing and our ways of supporting each other, and the diversification that we've been starting to explore, as an example with our building inspector being part of the coming into the fold, which in actual fact that $27,000 uplift is still lower than what we had before. The person was in that role before. In 2022 it was $38,000, and we didn't have that person at all last year. So that was a good move on diversifying our staff, and I think that there may be other ways of doing that as well. We do send a lot of people off to deployment, including our public works staff, and I'm curious to know whether or not we're paying them a wage when they go, as well as they get paid from BC wildfires. In a season, and each season is just getting worse and worse. The last few, we've had drought levels of 5, and we live in a forested community as well. So, we do need our people at home. I absolutely agree.
Councillor Donaldson?
Yes, Councillor Jukin.
Sorry, just as an aside, I actually have to drop off right at 9 o'clock, and I'm sorry for throwing this at people so late right now. But I'm just going to quietly go at the stroke of 9. So, sorry, just wanted to forewarn folks.
6. Thank you. So that would be 6 o'clock our time, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's what I mean.
Good night. It's 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Mayor Little?
Yeah, thank you. I am in favor of the new position. The fire chief has been promised for at least 5 years that I know of for some assistance. Without her and without her grant writing, the school would not be what it is, and we wouldn't be able to do hardly anything over there. As I understand, the new position's not only going to be firefighting, but is going to be some involvement with the school, perhaps with the booking, and I think we'll be able to save some money there. So I'd be very reluctant to not grant that new position. I understand it is a QP position, but I would be reluctant to delete it from the budget.
Councillor Gray, did you have?
Yeah, I'm going to support this as well. I think the question, though, I would like, as we've been doing already, a little bit of action on this one, would be if we could hear back from staff a little more particulars about the role. I very much appreciate what the councillors have just explained to us about being a firefighter. In addition, I thought it was a clerical position. So if we got just a little bit about what is the role to be, that would, I think, help in terms of understanding it. And we learned last year that we have a very lean staff complement, and that was, as Councillor Shukins reflected on again today, last year we were struggling with the idea that we provide an assistant to our deputy corporate officer because we have enough staff and maybe too many staff, or they could be cross-trained, and all of the discussion that we went through. And I think that we shouldn't make that mistake again. We probably need more staff, but on this one, I'm supporting. I would just like a little bit more information about what the role is, so that we could be aware of that. And perhaps with Mr. Payette here now, we could hear a bit more about the idea. It does come up. Mayor Little's just mentioned it, and I think there's been some thinking, but I don't know if it's on paper. Can this person help with the school sort of management booking, whatever the aspect of the administrative side is? If that would work, I think you're properly asking the question, Councillor Johnson. Does that work? Does that make sense? Between two departments and that. So I'd be open to the advice of our new CEO about that, and then that might mean, when we turn to my sheets later, the cost of that new position gets knocked out because it's actually within this new post at the fire department, new position for the school, that is. So if that would be okay, just get a bit more information on that spot. I think that'd be helpful, because I feel like I'm a bit blind here, but appreciating the comments that have all been raised by everybody else.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Gray. When this first came up, I know the fire chief did speak to it and saying that, she's just got so much going on and that she needs help. And at that point, it was administrative. Now I'm hearing different things tonight, so I feel like I'm the one that's left out of the talks. So certainly if staff could come back with something more thorough, we can have more to work with on that.
Thank you.
Next one is firefighter allowance of $30,000. Now each year this has gone up. Anybody have any comments on this?
Well,
this is, I believe is it the call-out pay?
Yeah, right. That's correct.
Right.
And my understanding is that's the call-out pay for increased volume, meaning there was a group of individuals who worked very hard, some at the table here, to bring back the medical calls. And most of our calls, I understand, are medical, and so this is the result of those efforts, is that we have the firefighters going out. And then listening to what we heard from a resident tonight about remember the seniors. We have a lot of seniors in the community, and that may be part of this call out, I'm not sure. But if it's, we do need to be responsible in terms of the remuneration due the people who are making these responses. And so it seems to me it's something that needs to sit there. But if I'm missing something, or I don't have that right, I'd certainly appreciate more clarity.
Right, and I recall the same. I know in 2022 it was $46,000. In 2024 we're looking at $80,000. And last year we spent approximately upwards of $55,000. That's still in flux, of course, because that's just a year to date. So it's an approximation. So yes, this is another $30,000 over last year. I'm not disputing, I'm just putting it out there for conversation, and I do recall that when we were at UBCM, there was a proposal that's gone up to the province for income tax relief, right, from instead of the $3,000 that our volunteers could actually put $10,000 towards their income tax. So all these things are helping with their cost of living and the work that they're doing as well. Mr. Husky.
I was just going to suggest to the committee that when it's time to look at the deployment issue, if the committee wishes to continue that practice, that reallocate part of the funding to the support staff, as well as the additional medical call volume. That's well within, just based on the revenue generated for the past 2 years, that's well within the I don't want to call it profit, but the net revenue that the deployment has brought in.
Councillor,
Do you need a motion to that effect to get it going, or how do we?
No, we don't need a motion, just make sure that
Yeah.
bring forward some kind of draft, like I said, keeping in mind that no municipalities in the neighborhood and close to us has policy to speak specifically to deployment revenue. So
If the deployment of firefighters and equipment, can fund some of the items in here. For one thing, having another permanent staff member daytime would cut down some on the amount for the firefighter allowance, because that person would be available to answer calls.
and therefore we would have to have deployment every year. We would, it's almost guaranteeing, so we have to be careful with that. I was one of the people that actually was involved with the bring back the calls, simply because the response time was so drastically putting us at risk because of where the ambulances were in, oftentimes in transit, and because we live so far away from an urban center, those were things that were important. On top of that, we've invested an incredible amount of training dollars, tax dollars, into our volunteers. So pleased to know that they actually are able to now do the calls that they were trained to do, that we've supported them all the way. Unfortunately, we've only received 5 months of the Protective Services monthly report, which I really do enjoy, and I know that there's more. They just probably are backlogged. Who knows? But on average, we're doing about 35 to 40 calls a month for medical. I don't know how many of these calls are 911 calls. That is something that we can find out from our dispatch, which is with Saanich Fire. And I'm sure they'd be more than willing and helpful in that regard. Nevertheless, great to know that our fire calls are down, but that's a regional prevention that's working, and building codes and everything else. So in this community, it's significant that it is medical. I don't know that these stats are higher than they were before those calls were taken away from us, but certainly having them back is helpful, especially having the investment that we have done for years of putting money into the fire department for their training.
Okay,
so leads us right into the next one for
training. Well, there's your word, is training.
Yeah.
Well, I think what we're saying is, just to summarize that, we'll leave this on our sheet as a priority, and then ask that some work be done to help us explain the use of the wildfire deployment money, like a policy, I guess, is what we'd be thinking about.
Okay, so the ask here is for an $8,000 top-up on training. It has become clear to me that our retention is very, very poor. Our turnaround is every 2 years, and so the chief has been doing recruitment every year. As she just reported the other day, there's 10 new recruits. Now, not all of them will make it through the program. Hopefully they will have benefited. We are paying for that recruitment training. I believe it's 6 months in duration, and we do buddy up with 2 other departments, so there's a training pool to help share some of the costs. Often you'll see extrication vehicles out on the tarmac, and now it's encroached onto what was a grassy area. I think what's really interesting to me on this, we pay a lot of things that go into the fire department. There's clearly the allowance, so those are the stipends for the call-outs. That's really important. There's uniforms, there's clothing, and when it says uniforms and clothing is things like the t-shirts and the hoodies, so kind of like the swag that goes with it. We outfit them in these sorts of things. So there's costs there. It's not a lot on the line item here. Although all these things will add up. We pay for the recognition event every year. They have a banquet. The travel costs going to different places for the training, bringing in instructors, all this sort of stuff. So there's quite a sum of money. And this is all 100% paid. I would like to know from the committee what your thoughts are that maybe in this educational program we're providing for people to be trained for the approximate 2-year turnaround, if maybe they have a bit of a buy-in of 25%. I know when I went to school, it was either bursaries or student loans, but I still was responsible for paying for my education in some factor. And I know that in the military, that when you take training from them, you're required to stay the same amount of years that they train you. We can't require that, obviously, of volunteers, but I don't think it's a big ask to maybe have them consider 25% of their training to help pay for some of the books and such. Thoughts? Yes, Councillor.
Just I think it's kind of difficult to discuss these issues, the fire issues, without the fire chief being here. And I really would prefer either to defer this till the time when she can be here. She's obviously on a call, or just leave it, because I don't think that we can really get answers without her. And I think she'd probably get quite upset if we asked to make the recruits start paying.
Well, I can't just assume that, and we're not making any motions or anything on this tonight. That'll be in April when we actually vote this budget in. So there's lots of time for that discussion. Absolutely. Marilyn, yes?
Yeah, let's leave this fire section for when the fire chief has been at every other meeting. So she'll probably be at the next, so we can ask her very specific questions, not only about the new position, but about the firefighter allowance and the training and the total that is spent on training per individual.
Okay, so if we turn over to the other pages, there's only one other item, and that's the storm damage of $10,000. Mr. Nosky, can you elaborate on this, please?
So this item is another guesstimate again. It's we're predicting extended storm damage that, so what this primarily will involve is the crew going out primarily to clean up for damages from storm. What I was going to suggest to that is we can move that item, because we do have a public works reserve that can be tapped into if we need that. So it's just as a backup.
Councillor Gray.
Yeah, I would agree with if the Mr. Nelsey is recommending that, then fine. I think what we need to be aware of, though, is that as time goes forward, we are going to have bigger and worse storms. We know that. So given the tax crunch that I think I'm feeling and others are feeling, maybe this isn't the year to add the 10 grand, but perhaps we could have a reminder to ourselves for next year. That's a place where probably we should move that budget up a little bit. I mean, if next year's any kinder to us, I don't know. But we have the ability of putting it into next year's budget in our plan. So I would sort of soften it by saying, sure, take it from reserve this year if needed, but let's put it in next year so that it's there, and we'll get the same reminder. And if we're repeating next year, then we'll know we have to put it in the budget.
Yeah, I agree. Monitoring that is key.
Because, like, looking at the actual spends, it's jumping up. And no doubt it'll keep increasing. We had a budget of 20,000. We spent 24,000. I don't know what the number will be after the snowstorm and all the rest for this year. There'll be more there. Thank you.
Marilyn?
Yeah, so my estimates are right. I've shaved off 65,000 in those 28,000, 27,000, and then the 10,000. Okay.
Sorry, how was that?
28,000,
Yeah.
28,000, 27,000, and 10,000.
Where was the 28, sorry? I can't find
The 28 is the road safety projects and community health support.
And the 3 and the 5, or the, sorry, 3 and the 25,000.
Moving it to another area.
So the 28, I see that one, and the next one was just for.
The 27,000, that's the doggy do.
Oh, correct. Thank you.
And then the 10,000 is the storm damage.
Right. Good. Okay, can we move forward? We're ready to, okay. So can I bring your attention to page 13? But before we do, I just want to compliment staff for putting this package together. And you'll notice it's a little bit different layout than last time. It's more embellished. We have the codes down the left side, and we have the highlighted budget down the center. So longitude and latitude, a little easier to find some things. I'm not going to go through this line by line. We did that learning curve last year, but there are some areas that I have some questions on, and please bring forward any areas that you have as well. So if you can turn to page 13, general governance, and this is under personnel. On the bottom of that same list, that section where it's got staff training and education, there's 2 line items here I'd like to have a discussion about. Okay, so the first one is line item 2480, and it's in 2022 it was 2,200 and change. We spent approximately 2,800 last year. The budget is for 7,000. I don't know if you want to reduce it to 3,000 or 4,000, but 7,000 is a little steeper, and I certainly want to support our staff in getting training. I think it was valuable last year for some of our staff to be able to go out onto some of the courses through local government. I think it's the LGLU organization, and the other ones as well. Thoughts? Councillor Gray.
I would ask that we ask our CEO to come back to our next meeting and report on that. What's his recommendation?
Okay, and then if we go to the next line item, in 2022 it was $5,400 that went into staff conferences. We spent approximately over $13,000 last year, almost $14,000. So we're seeing that here as $14,000. I'm not sure all of where this went. I know where some of it went because I had the responsibility of co-signing some of those checks, and they were pretty big conferences. One was up in Whistler, and I think there might have been one in Kelowna area, the interior, and Vancouver. And I don't know who all this applied to. I do know that our interim CAO was had the ability to take some of these conferences. I'm not sure who else. What are your thoughts? The big leap from the 6,000 2 years ago.
Yeah, same comment. If we could hear back from our CEO about that. I think we want to support him in his education and other staff, and so I'd just like to get a report back on that. Not education, continuing education, excuse me.
Any other comments, committee?
Councillor Donaldson,
Yes,
I can just
please.
mention, so going forward, the next budget, you'll see that those 2 line items have been combined, just because of, to me, it doesn't make sense to separate them out. It's training, is conference, and it's just, we're going to make it consistent. We're going to call it staff training and conference, as well as council training and conference.
Thank you.
So
I
that
appreciate that.
there's no need to differentiate it. It is training.
Great.
After all, the end of the day.
Yeah, that would be helpful for sure. Meryl?
So just for clarification, so is there redundancy there? So that would be a total of $21,070?
That's correct. So we're just combining the budgets and being put forward as one line item instead of trying to separate them. That's correct.
So again, that would have been a difference of $8,000 2 years ago, and then, yeah, it's quite significant still. Okay. Okay, we've already we'll put the fire department on hold. Get more input from the chief on that. Policing, bylaw enforcement, and building department we've already discussed.
So, Councillor Dawson, if I could just add a little information about policing. We met with Langford today, and we spoke briefly about the support staff for policing. So they are finally going to go forward and start hiring for our members.
Great.
So the ratio that's being proposed is 3-to-1, so we will be funding almost 2 support staff.
Okay, that's good news to hear. Several of us attended the State of the Union meeting. I think it was last week or the week before, with the RCMP and our regional councils. And this was one of the things that came up. And I don't think we had all the information we needed at that time, but good to know that there's some a bit more of a conclusion. Mayor Little.
So if my calculation is right, then so 2 support workers at about 50,000.
I would say all in, so it would be 100,000. So in the sense that you're getting paid for not just the support staff, but also overhead, IT service, HR, and things like that.
100,000 each. 100,000 each, and then and the officers, we've got 4 or 3.
This year, the full complement is 5, but again, we don't know what the actual bill is going to be. However, many members we end up funding for 2024, even when the contract says 5. Most of the time, I've found from experience that you never hit the full strength. So it could be, who knows, 4.5, 4.25, whatever it is. You will know till middle of next year.
Okay, Councillor Gray.
I'm just wondering, how late are we running tonight?
Well, I think the only one that's left is the transportation. There was the planning one that Councillor Gray wanted to speak, or Shukin wanted to speak to, which would be the recreation and culture. We can pause here and continue at another meeting in 2 weeks. What would the committee like to do?
Can we continue for a bit?
Sure. Okay. It's almost 6:30.
Yeah, if we
Okay.
can continue for a bit, and while we've got some momentum going here.
Okay. So, yes, go
We
ahead.
just set a time that we're going to shut it down.
Okay, I don't wish to go past 7. I have critters to feed an hour ago, so they're relying on me, as well as the residents of this community. So
thank you.
To make responsible decisions. Okay. So let's say 7 at the absolute latest. Okay. Okay. Anything on bylaw enforcement? Everybody okay with that page?
Well, maybe I didn't really sort out what we're doing. I wanted to go back to the first page of general government. So I had a question, I may as well bring it up now.
Yes.
Do we have IT ransomware protection? And that, for the obvious reason I'm asking.
Right. So we do not have ransomware protection, but we will be implementing cybersecurity training as well as primarily training. There is a cyber protection already from phishing and things like that on the system, but it's the training that will be implemented. So it will be for both council and staff. what it looks like in that training is there will be little messages and emails sent out to both staff and council. Some of them will be fishing, some of them will be fishing, some will be smishing, whatever else. So the intention is for training. So if you click on it, and it's something that you shouldn't have clicked on, it's just really friendly message will pop up and says, oh, you shouldn't have done this. And then it takes you to education piece for things for you to watch out for in the future so that you don't click on the actual malicious emails. So it's a really great program. It's something that I've done in the past. And don't feel bad if you click on it. Even the head of IT has clicked on. We're on malicious phishing email, so it's an opportunity for training and learning.
So that sounds good, but I'm concerned that if all of our data was grabbed, we would be in big trouble. I think the ransomware protection material, I don't recall if it was UBCM or AVIC or who sent it, something or other, a note about it. It seems to be some value to do this transfer of our data. I guess is that every night they transfer it out so that, and then sever the connection with the stored data with the internet, so that no matter what happens, you always have your data. So that maybe I'm just concerned about it because it's a big issue these days, and we would be crippled. I don't know what it costs to do that kind of work, but that would be something that I think would be worth exploring between now and finalizing this budget. And it could come back that Mr. Platt would say, no, we've looked at it and we're not a category of organization that needs that, or we have different type of computers. But just some advice on whether or not that should be a priority in the budget, I would appreciate. And I'm thinking this year because this is when it might happen. It's been very disabling to some hospitals, and they pay the ransom basically. So if that could just be an action item, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, it actually happened to a municipality, Whistler, a couple of years ago, and it was emergency. They had their system was down for, I believe, a couple of days. It was so that's a really good point, Councillor Greg.
Thanks. So that was my only to go back to.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks for bringing that. I remember that in your document, so I appreciate you bringing that forward. Thank you. So that brings us to the transportation services page. We've already spoken to a few of these things. Page 25 we've already addressed. Page 26 looks like we've already addressed quite a bit there, unless someone sees something different.
Oh.
Yes, Councillor Gray.
Yeah, I wanted to mention, you'll see in my correspondence there, but the climate plan, which would come under planning and environmental services. Our climate plan, we made a bunch of commitments and ideas, and since I put together my sheets, I realized that I talked to Mr. Arnowski, and it turns out, so I did this more for information because it's one that is sitting out that we will be there. There is a local government climate action program which is provided, and I have these numbers courtesy of our CFO. The climate action reserve stands at about $53,000 at the moment, and we have funding from 2023 of $75,000, so that is additive. And there may, I'm not sure, there may be some money this year. So while I've highlighted, and I know people, you'll be thinking, oh gosh, what are we going to do? It looks like there would be money there for a planner time if the planner were to be available. Of course, planners are a hot commodity right now, so it may not be that there's, we may run into a different kind of a problem. But there would be money to do a variety of the things that we see on our strategic plan and in our climate plan in terms of planning and getting documents together. I think some of the bylaws that we're working on, the cost could be put to the climate plan if we label them as such and code them as such. So I think there's opportunities there. Even the ditching study, something like that could be paid for, in my view, as a climate plan if we did that. So there's a variety of things there that will help. So I just want to give you confidence or just say that one on my list I think we can put aside, because there are various ways within our reserves to fund any activity that council was to decide to march forward with.
So that's climate plan reserves you're referencing?
Yeah, climate action reserve.
Climate action, right.
I don't mean that it is my purview. I mean, we have that money for the various initiatives that we come up with.
So a little bit more information about that is in the past, this will be year 3 for the LG Cap local government climate action plan funding. In the past 2 years, because of our lack of resources to come up with plans that should be spent from the fund, the province does not like to see municipalities stash the money in the reserves, which is what we're doing right now. And also, for the past 2 years, we've only been transferring $6,000 to it's called a carbon neutral reserve, instead of the full funding amount. So going forward for this year, the next version of the budget, you'll see that I'm proposing to transfer the full amount of the funding into the reserve with the objective of coming up with projects that can be executed with the funds. It just looks much better for the next reporting that we can say that, yeah, we received this much money, we actually spent it, and I did something with the funding, as opposed to just letting it sit and build in the reserve.
And do we know how much is in there right now?
So right now it's about $53,000 plus the 75 if the committee approves the transfer for this year, which is the full amount. So it's a healthy chunk of almost $130,000.
An example of spending would be, let's say we, well, even the time spent on looking at riparian area regulation, and then let's say we decide to do an educational program, we're going to need money to draw from that because of the climate action even. And looking at the description of the use of those funds, it fits perfectly. So we don't, when we hear about, oh, we should educate or this and that, well, we'll have possibly human resource problems getting there, but it doesn't look like we have money problems getting there, which is kind of nice.
And these monies be able to be used for like shoreline plans?
There is a whole list of criteria, yes.
Okay.
And the answer is, I believe so, yeah. So one-time events that we do. And so exactly.
Okay.
You're on it.
Yeah, well, no, I get all sorts of stuff in the back of my head.
Yeah.
Gradually coming forward, so good to know, because I know those are in our site.
Yeah, I just learned about, got educated about the last day or so, so that's taking care of a bunch of my worries too.
Okay. So that's the Planning and Environment Services page. And we have, sorry, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out the irony of us spending a whack of money on a shoreline protection when we are cutting doggy-doo collection at the shoreline.
Yes.
I think we have to be careful in what we do practically. I don't like spending $27,000 for doggy-doo collection either, but I don't like to see plastic bags full of dog poop on our shoreline, and that's something that we can practically do. I would almost want to do that before I do a shoreline study, because that's something practically we can do, and something that is obvious and so egregious. Anyways,
very good point.
I'm not asking for a response, I'm just making an observation that probably some of our citizens will observe as well.
Right.
I totally agree, and that's why I guess I spoke in favor of the doggy-doo collection.
Right.
It's a tricky business, but I think the money that's available to us is for those other purposes, and they're not giving us money for doggy-doo collection, so that's the bind. But your point is one I agree with.
But it's a good point that we could use some of the money for our bylaw review. Tree protection bylaw, for instance, is a good one. Stormwater management bylaw, that would also be, I think, applicable. So I think that's a very good point.
Yeah, I'll add that stormwater one here too.
Good. I just wanted to make a point here, as it was brought up, of public participation, and we did get a letter from Mr. Kubicek about the rabbit infestation, and we certainly have put 20,000, so we've doubled that this year. Key to this, of course, is that when we hired the contractor, that he does a follow-up without too much space in between, so we can work with the reproduction cycle of these little creatures.
Yeah, and this is a much bigger topic too. I mean, we got going last year, one-time funding. I mean, the situation is somewhat disastrous, and hearing Mr. Kubicek tonight, you realize, yes, and it's going to be ongoing, and we talked about that. So it's critical for farmers and gardeners that we be active there. But I myself started to think then, okay, this is going to be really ongoing, and I wonder if we should be doing it in partnership. In other words, should we be, I'm not proposing it right here, but within the agricultural plan, perhaps we can get some advice about invasive species. We've got rabbits, the knapweed we're spending money on, again, that's in effect for farmers, the geese, and then we've got the normal wildlife, the cougars, the bears, the deer, and deer fencing is required everywhere, but we don't pay for that. The district doesn't pay for it. So maybe some recommendations from the agriculture group about the roles. What's our role? What's the role of the farmers? I'm talking in support of the farmers here, by the way, not reducing it, but just understanding where our roles are and what we'll do. Because an investment in a pile of traps, rabbit traps, may be as important as paying a contractor to come. The cost could be quite enormous to catch all these rabbits. So anyway, I'm just thinking outside the box here about all the different kinds of things that are coming at us, and how we work to support the farmers, the gardeners, and everybody else against the rabbit invasion. But I'm kind of wondering what's next.
So on this same thread then, so can these reserve funds be used for this invasive species? Or is that a stretch?
That'd be a stretch.
Mm-hmm. So in regards to the agriculture plan, we're still working with the consultants on that. We will be having an open house for the farmers coming up on the, what is the date? Is it the 16th?
Yeah.
Yeah, the 16th, because the day before is the Farmer to Farmer conference that we're also at. So we will be bringing an update to the farmers on that, getting some input from them. So it's one of our stakeholder consultations. And as I understand it, once our ag plan is done, it will open up the doors for us to be able to apply for different kinds of grants and that sort of investment, educational plans for eradicating these things. I did speak to Mr. Kubicek earlier today and encouraged him to come tonight, so that was this afternoon, so that was great. And the fact that this is more than probably twofold, but certainly twofold. There must be an education plan. We were doing this last year, and at the same time, Public Works, one of the members found somebody had dropped off yet another rabbit. So we need to let not just the people in this community, but other communities know that they need to be responsible for their pets, and the whatever their end goal is not to be the dumping ground of this community.
Yeah. We also had the problem of some residents are quite partial to rabbits, and so our contractor wasn't able to go onto private lands where they wasn't welcome, obviously, and that. So we will always have a reservoir, or quite possibly we'll always have a reservoir, but the education maybe will help that. Talking about the agricultural plan, talking about finances, the other thing that I would be interested in is that we have a big role in supporting farmers through the tax system, and I'm hoping the plan will discuss a little bit of what's our role in terms of that farming and all of those questions, because we give a tax break, it's true, but are all those tax breaks appropriate, and how do they work, and what's their advice for us on that front? I'm not complaining here, I'm more just wanting to understand it a little bit better, and that kind of advice would help us maybe in our financial questions.
So as a farmer, I'd like to speak to that. When I was both at AVIC and UBCM last year in the trade show, BC Assessment Authority was there, and we've been farming for over 30 years, and I have to say the threshold for my responsibility for doing the paperwork it has not changed in over 3 decades of what I need to gross each year. So I had said, when are you going to change that? So certainly for the small farms like myself, I wouldn't suggest it for the larger farms, but for the small farms like myself, at this point they could actually double it and still would work out fine for, I know, farmers like myself in the caliber of farming, the size, is still doable. I know some people, they will only do just what they need to do to get the farm status, and so doubling it certainly may flush out the seriousness of farmers and their commitment to food security. Ms. Tarnowski, did you have a comment about that?
I was just going to comment that the district and municipalities don't play a part in the tax reduction. It's done through BC assessment.
So the lobbying needs to be there.
Yeah, and what ought we lobby for? It's important to us, I think, generally to be supportive, but at the same time understand the situation so that we're aware of it.
It still is a conversation to have. So when we're at AVIC in the next 2 months, that would be a conversation to have again. And he says that the offices are right here in the city, so it's.
I'll just mention too that the tax break on people who some say, well, they're not farming. It's actually very important to us in a different way in that it reduces pressure for subdivision. So there is a push and a tug, and just understanding that dynamic would be a good thing.
Anything else on planning and environment? Did we want to? Was it Councillor Shukin actually had the paper here? Not sure what that meant.
It was Parks and Trails, right?
Right.
Did we pass Public Works?
Yeah, the transportation services. Did you want to add something?
Well, I just had what folks have seen. I'm aware, I was told by the manager of Instinct Training that when I was over there one day that there were sharps, needles and things like that on the ground in the back of the school. And so it's my view that we should put sharps containers in the various facilities that we have around the district, the ones that we have. I don't know there's a cost to that, but I think it would be a wise thing to do just in terms of the health of the community. It's also very helpful for diabetics, so people have a place to put their needles. I don't know the cost of that, but I raise it just as an issue that I think the times are such that we should get on that.
Maybe the fire chief might have some information on that. This was also another concern with the doggy do canisters. All sorts of paraphernalia end up in those.
Absolutely, got to be careful what you touch in terms of your
there's a
hands.
risk factor.
Well, maybe we could get an idea of if it's a cost. If it's not significant, it can just be absorbed. That's great. I just want to raise it as a health issue.
I'll raise it at the school, that second item, but the one item I would like to raise before we move away from planning is that the next version you'll see that $172,000 grant coming in, and then $172,000 of expenses. No, not specific, but just really wanting to earmark that there's money coming in, and we will have to spend money, but just not, we don't know what it is. So I just made it in and out neutral. Like there's no impact on the taxes or no additional revenue. I didn't want it to be seen as there's additional revenue if we didn't spend as much.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Sorry, I don't know where that is. Can you point it out to me?
So in the next version,
Oh,
because
next,
I did, next version, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councillor.
And then I had another one, which was the question we had talked at council about the period promise. In other words, placing Kotex or Tampax available for people to be using in our washrooms. I don't know the cost. I've checked with a councillor in Sandwich who says the price is about equivalent to the cost that we spend on toilet paper. Like it's an equivalent. That's the equivalency they're using in their budget where they're bringing that on. It's under the period promise.
I just wanted to remind the committee that there is the disposal aspect of those period products. So just keep that in mind, given the fact of the difficulty we had with our bathroom lines last year.
That's right.
And that might get handled with receptacles in the wall and things. Anyway, getting an idea of cost. Again, if it's insignificant and can be taken care of, fine, but I think it might be worth considering here under the public works side of things. And we've talked about it in council before. So one other thing I'll just mention is that we don't have the buffer land and parks management here. And the buffer land is a hugely important thing to us all. There was a document that came from the buffer land working group that I think should be made public. That, following the council resolution. So if we get that into an agenda, that would be good. But I talked to Councillor Shukin about it, planning stage, super rough estimate, like nothing to stand on at all. $25,000, $50,000. That's a number per year in the first 2 or 3 years. That's not a fixed number. It's not been looked at by staff, nothing like that. In fact, staff are now doing the second layer of trying to get an actual number what might go. But Councillor Shukin suggesting that will be not this year's budget, but possibly next year.
Yeah, as I recall, we're waiting for a report back from staff on that.
Okay. So I don't know if it'll come into this year's budget, but if it does, we'll know what to do about that.
Right. Okay. So regarding Councillor Shukin's document here of PTAS request, I was actually at this meeting but for another subject on the agenda, and so I had the privilege of listening to the deliberations. They have $10,000 in as a budget line item. They've had that for well over 10 years, probably 2 decades. It's never really changed much. And the community of Albert had a specific group that's campaigning for safe passage along Duke Road East. One of the things that they have cited in their presentations to do it in a phase-in approach. They're looking right now to put that $10,000, which is their budget for the year, into a survey, I guess, to figure out where. It was hard to tell if there was many options, if it was the pins they were looking for or whatever. So they've had some on-site evaluation, and they had Mr. Parapolkin come out with them as well to do a walkabout. They've got some different proposals as to where some parts of the roadside you can go down, but you'd have to go over to the other side of the road, and so what is the transgression there? So they're looking at getting a survey done. So that is one of the items here to decide, is there room to actually put a trail route along this section of road. Interesting to note, when I spoke with Councillor Shukin, they have not started anything on updating the Trails Master Plan, which is in the OCP. There's 6 different categories of priorities, and many of those trails have been developed. There's still a few that have not, that are priority. There's third one on the list hasn't even been looked at in well over 10 years, and I know that it's significant. The district did spend money on surveying and found that private property owners had taken over some ownership. This might be worth revisiting and seeing if we could do a property adjustment, because these are fixed. Well, one is a fence, the other one is a pool, which is now on public land. So maybe some boundary adjustment and get that trail, which doesn't need any upgrades. It's just a natural trail. It's a neighborhood connector. It's dedicated. It just needs to be more useful. Anyways, these are things that the master plan, they haven't touched on it yet. So something to look at. But as far as survey, they're asking for that, and then $10,000 to go to the development of phase 1 of this, whatever their findings are. So PTAS wishes to maintain the regular allocation of $10,000 in the recreation minor capital expenses in the recreation and culture budget, which is the page that we're looking at here. And as Councillor Shukin says, as you know, the planned repairs to the Weir Beach stairs was not completed in 2023. At the June 19th, 2023 council meeting approved a budget of $15,000. And he goes on further to recognize the discussions about that. Also, there's been, even as recent as today, another member of the community explaining how important this connector trail is. There is a liability issue that staff was going to look at, and I see that Ms. Tarnowski has her finger up there, so I'd like to hear more from you on where we're at with that, please.
So where I left off in December was conversation with Mr. Mark Wood from Vancouver. He is not an engineer, but he designs what he refers to as prescriptions for stairs. Sounds like we are on the same wavelength, because he says all his prescriptions are designed to blend in with the environment. So you never see the set of manufactured stairs that he will design. So he is trying to determine a date that he's able to come to the island, hopefully to coordinate with his work with Langford.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, he will take a walk down to the stairs and take a look at the site itself and come up with a prescription. The very preliminary quote that he gave was approximately $20,000 to build a set of natural stairs. So not far off from the budget for last year.
Yes, Councillor Gray.
I look forward to that report. I think it would be good to have that passageway open and usable. So on the financing side, I think we have $15,000 that's one-time leftover, $15,000, but it was within, as I recall, a one-time amount of $50,000, 50. So if that's correct, we roll over the entire $50,000. We've got the $15K to build the Weirs Group stairs, and these other budget amounts would fit in within that as well. They seem to be one time, so we didn't spend the $50,000 as I recall.
Yeah, and that $50,000 was left over from the proposal of a roadside trail along Woodhead Road to Taylor. And so it's just been reallocated to something that has come up a little bit more urgently, well, a lot more urgently. The Weir Beach stairs is, I think, is key to that particular neighborhood.
So through you, could we ask our CFO to put those onto the one-time list?
Yes.
And then that would help Councillor Shukin and get us the Weirs Beach, save that money so we've got it to complete the Weirs Beach stairs.
Okay, so just want to go back up to the top here where the $10,000 for the survey would come out of their budget. What about the other $10,000? Any comments on that? Or shall we wait till Councillor Shukin is present?
I was going to suggest if we roll over, well, we will carry over the $50,000, then that could be a part of that, because the $50,000, I'm just trying to recall, I don't recall that being was for one specific project. It was just $50,000.
That's what I remember.
That's right, yeah.
Marilyn, did you have a comment?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Oh, I had one other miscellaneous.
Okay.
Under emergency services, if you look at the emergency services page, you'll see that there's $1,000 that hasn't been spent for a number of years for volunteer appreciation.
So I want to wait till the chief is here because I have a question. I believe it's taken care of probably in the fire department budget, because now at one point in time they were separate kind of departments, and they were merged a few years ago, which put her in charge of that department as well. So I do know they do an appreciation, so I'm thinking that's where it is. But I did highlight it, but because she's not here, I wanted to kind of wait.
Certainly, just to say it's not spent for a couple of years in a row now.
Exactly.
So probably it could take place of the $700 we have for volunteer appreciation, just spread it to a wider group.
Yeah, there's two line items there. Actually, there was another one. Was an honorarium or something like that, and again, it hasn't been spent in a number of years, so it's...
These are small amounts of money, but...
Yeah, they are, but
if it's available, then that would, that would remove the need for the added $700.
Right, yeah, so...
and achieve the same end.
Okay. Okay. Are we okay with the... moving on from the planning environment page? Oh, and I see that the recreation culture does have the trails, so I ahead of myself here. No, I don't have any further comments on this one either, other than when I do set up an appointment to speak to our new CAO, I'd like to talk to him a little bit about the maintenance of this building. Specifically, demossing the roof was one of the ones that was brought to my attention not too long ago. So it's the wet season now, so I don't want to do that. But yeah, so there's a couple different things here, that little items, but there's nothing that really stands out here that makes a great deal of attention other than the trails. Anyone else see anything, Mary?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask some questions about the contracted services in the planning and environment. Because it it's proposed in the budget 95,000, that's almost a position. And that's only for 2 days a week, right, for a planner. So is that because of the housing, and then we'll go back to our spending of about 50,000, or like that's a lot of money for 2 days a week?
So that is double because of the housing. We did say again, our planner, the contract planner, is only available 2 days a week. Even we're going to ask her to do any initiative, she's not available for 2 days a week. So this is going. The intention. This is only going to be, well, I shouldn't say 1 year, but 2024 for sure, potentially 2025, depending what bills are passed.
Didn't we get money for that?
Yes, we did. But again, until we can, so this may change, will likely change when a more detailed plan is, a work plans come, is designed for, to meet the needs of all the housing bills that were recently passed.
Thank you. Okay, so any comments on the school page? I think we covered quite a bit this earlier. There's 2 line items here that stand out for me. One is the school contracted services. Somebody's going to need to, I guess, do some work on trying to find somebody to lease the place. And the other one was obviously the leasing agent, and that was held by, both of those I believe were held by Mr. Chris Core in the past. Where are we today?
So the line item that is referred to as the school contracted services, 11,300 of that was moved from the leasing agent, but for the $16,000 was included in the actuals for 2023 are assorted, I'll call them assorted, miscellaneous contracted services like getting the lines cleared out, all that kind of services, yeah.
Okay. Committee, any comments on this page that maybe we haven't discussed yet?
So I'm just wondering, that means that when we see this next, the 11,300 will be added to the 2024?
It already has been added to the line item that says 27,400 total. It's in there.
Thank you. Then we talked about it earlier, but we'll have to come back, I suppose, to this page or the fire department page or some other page to say where's the books management.
Okay, so I believe we probably covered a great deal of your comments in your document, Councillor Gray.
Yes, thank you, and I want to express my appreciation to you as the chair for going through the priorities and the cost pressures as our number one job, and thanks to our CFO. I found that very helpful to go through that, and now I feel like we're not, as Mayor Little's pointed out, we're not a lot better, but we have addressed a few items, and I think if we come back now, we'll be able to look at our refresh list and say, is there more things we want to take off, or are we staying where we are? And we'll have a better estimate of the taxes, and hopefully a number that's lower this time than higher. So thank you for that. Thank you to the committee entirely.
Yeah, I'm always reminded, Ms. Tarnowski must copy and paste her report sometimes. No criticism, but she reminds us that like most municipalities, desired improvements, needs and wants in the district outweighs the financial capability of the small rural community. So I appreciate that reminder each time because I go back and I look at it, wow. So, here we are tonight. We've deliberated the budget more again. And I appreciate Ms. Tarnowski preparing this budget for us and walking us through some of these important topics. Hopefully we're getting to our end goal. I'm not certain yet. So we'll see where we are after she reconciles some of these discussions points.
So just a last comment about the proposed tax increases. Obviously, nothing's close to final yet. We have very enthusiastic financial colleagues in the area say, oh, what's the percentage looking like?
Mm-hmm.
So far from the municipalities who have done their first initial draft presentations, it's ranging from about 4.5 to slightly over 10, 11, 12. Again, nowhere close to final, but that's what we're seeing. So it's a pretty huge range. The ones that with the lower tax increase obviously have new construction to offset the tax increases. But just a bit of information for the committee.
Well, and that's an interesting point because I know when Mayor Little and I were, I'm not sure, I think it was AVEC, one of the local councillors in the CRD, they kept their tax rate down to 4, and we asked, well, how did you do that? They didn't put anything into reserves as one of those things, correct? So that was kind of interesting. I mean, we were facing different costs last year with the policing was a big one. I really like to get it down to 10. I really like to get it out of double digits, but I'm seeing it's very, very challenging. And it's not just the needs and the wants, but there are things we really do need to address. It's, for a lot of different reasons that you've cited in your report, and the community has been beckoning for as well. But the reality is we can't appease to everything. We just have to find a comparable balance. Yes.
Yeah, there you go. The other thing that I wondered about, which might be a good idea for our report, is just to, there's some basic assumptions in the projections, inflation and whatever they are, and just a little paragraph to say what those assumptions are, I think might be helpful for us to complete the package.
Anything else, committee? Yes.
I was just thinking it's not only needs and wants, but it's also expectations of services. And that certainly comes into mind talking about the fire department. So we'll have to. It is real, that expectations.
Well, and we saw that even at the school visioning, the expectation of some space to be free, some services to, I'm not really sure. I don't have an orchard of money trees growing in my property, but where we're going to get it from. And the school is still sort of, we're at another stage now, so it's a little bit of a new infancy stage. We don't know how much use and the gym or the facility is going to get. I mean, the more commercial we have there, the better, but the rental could fluctuate so much, it's not predictable. And so I guess that's why I'm a bit reserved of hiring somebody to manage it yet, and we don't even know what our needs are for over there. So it's a precarious situation. Ms. Turner?
Yeah, just to that point, it's a bit of a chicken and egg, isn't it? We need somebody to generate revenue, and we don't know how much revenue we're going to generate. And, so it's a bit cyclical.
But we're starting to get more things in place. We've got a fee structure now, so that's a good starting point. We've still got more work to do on that with our fields and parking plan and Councillor.
Oh, it was just at a recent meeting I was at. They were talking about public facilities like the school and rec facilities all around, and the conversation was as if they were expected to be money makers, then more private industry would be running them. They are considered a service, not in other ways, but they are a service to the community, just like many other things that we fund. So,
Well, and so there comes the concept of user pay as being the board member on, as we own, I think it's 1/5 of the West Shore Parks and Recreation. It costs a lot of money to run that facility, and so people still have to pay every time they come in the door. And so it's very, very costly to all users, not just taxpayers in a community situation. So yeah, I still must pay. That's not free. Okay, so with that, given the time of day, I'm going to bypass the public input part and move on to correspondence. Thank you, Councillor Gray, for your priority ranking framework. Ms. Pattie Whitehouse for her reports. There's a couple of them there for us to reflect on. That was very helpful for me to follow a bit of a timeline since I've left that group, and to Mrs. Ballard for her layout of some points that I'm hoping we covered most of tonight. So with that, I would like to call the meeting adjourned. Someone can make a motion.
Do you want a motion to receive
Oh,
the
yes,
correspondence?
please.
So I move to receive all of the correspondence in full.
Including including Councillor
all together.
Schupens, yes. Okay, that would be great. So moved by Mayor Little and seconded by Councillor Gray.
Yeah, and having just received the last one, we can run through Ms. Ballard's to see what's there at our next meeting if there's anything that we've missed.
Sure. So in the meantime, I would ask the committee to review that again, because it's lengthy, and so there's lots of detail there that has been put into it. So if you could do that, that would be great. And if we could make a note of that for the next, like an action item maybe for the next meeting, if anything comes up.
And happy Burns Day.
Okay.
Before we vote.
So call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Motion by Mayor Little to adjourn, second by Councillor F. All in favor, and it's carried as well. Thank you very much, everybody.